Welcome to Development Control B on the 8th of July 2020. Welcome to the meeting. My name's Cathy Guthrie and I'm the chairman today. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are muted when you are not speaking, that you do not interrupt the other speaker. Members are reminded that we're not using the messaging or chat facility. Members are reminded they should not have alternative communication lines open, and that if you are contacted by a third party, during the application, you should bring this to the legal advisor's domestic arrangements. That if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Additionally, you will be invited to speak and ask questions by the chair, myself, of the meeting. Please await your turn. We won't be using the hands up function except for declarations of interest, site visits, or declarations of lobbying. If you are experiencing poor connection issues in the first instance, please turn off your camera. If this does not work, please turn off all incoming video. These options are under the 3 dots in your main information bar. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those sound and recordings for webcasting and for training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. I'll now do introductions. Ian Dupre, the legal advisor.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Robert Carmichael, Governance Officer.
Good morning, Chair.
John Pateman-G, Area Planning Manager.
Good morning, and just add to that, I'm not sharing video. Unfortunately, I don't have a video capacity on my Surface Pro, so therefore I can't share video. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alex Scott, the case officer for this first application, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Members.
All right, we'll get you, and when you give us the presentation, we'll see you. So can I move on to the agenda, please? I will now ask the Governance Officer to roll call for members present.
Thank you, Chair. If you could please respond with present or good morning. So Councillor James Carston.
Present.
Councillor Peter Gould.
Present.
Councillor Cathy Guthrie.
Present.
Councillor Barry Humphreys.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Mellon.
Present.
Councillor Mike Norris.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Stringer.
Present.
And Councillor Roland Warboys.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. We are all present.
Excellent. Moving on to item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. If there are any to declare, please use the hands up function. No, thank you. Moving on, declarations of lobbying. If there are any to declare, please use the hands up function. Andrew Mellon, Councillor Mellon, could you tell us, please?
Yes, Chair. I'd just like to declare that I've had a discussion on the Mendlesham application with the ward member, Mr. Stringer.
Thank you for that. Declarations of personal site visits. And I'm actually going to put my hand up. From the point of view, I drove past the second application site to go and get my eggs from the egg dispensary, and I drove past the site. Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of April 2020. Are there any points regarding accuracy of the minutes, please? And then again, please put your hands up and I will come to you then. So there are none. So if you are happy, from page 7 to page 12, I will sign them. But did you want to go through a roll call, officer?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, we'll need to go through. We need a
Right.
proposer, seconder, and to go through a roll call.
May I have a proposer, please? You can use the hand facility, please. Councillor Stringer, yes. Proposer, and a seconder, please. Yes, Councillor Caston.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll go through the roll call. So if you could please respond with for, against, or abstain. So Councillor James Carston.
For.
Councillor Peter Gould.
For.
Councillor Kathy Guthrie.
For.
Councillor Barry Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mellon.
For.
Councillor Mike Norris.
For.
Councillor Andrew Stringer.
For.
And Councillor Roland Warboys.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That is unanimous and carried.
So the minutes will be signed at the next practicable availability. To receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
The schedule of the planning applications, we will move to the first item. And it should be noted that item 7B, Delta Charlie, /19, /05949, land to the northwest of Mason Court, brackets Old Engine Meadow, has been withdrawn by officers with my agreement and will not be considered today. So can we just have a brief update from the area planning manager to give us a short overview as to why this matter won't be heard, please?
Thank you. The matter in question, it's come to light that there were agreement over amended plans coming forward, and it was seen to be inappropriate to take this forward to committee without exploring those other options. Now, it is a case of reasonable behaviour, and we have taken the decision to take it away from committee to consider these alternative plans and then return it to committee when we're in an agreed position. So we apologise for this, but we don't want to be seen as unnecessary work and unreasonable behaviour, especially if the decision was to be one of refusal and we ended up at appeal. So on the basis of risk, we have decided to withdraw the appeal, withdraw the committee item.
Thank you for that. So we now move to the case officer, Alex Scott, to introduce the application to the committee. And I think at this point, if people could just turn off their videos so that the presentation can be clear, but I will keep mine on if everybody's happy with that. So Alex, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Members and everybody present, this is item 7A in your papers, planning application reference DC 19 05915, land north of Chapel Road in Mendlesham. And the application seeks outline planning permission with all matters reserved, save for access. Matters of access are to be considered today, for the erection of 20 new dwellings and the creation of a new access to Chapel Road, Mendlesham. The proposal includes 7 affordable housing, that's 35% of the total, and approximately 5,950 square metres of open space, indicated to be between the proposed housing and the countryside to a northwest edge of the village. And this equates to approximately 1,215 square metres of formal public open space and 4,734 square metres of informal open space, including sustainable drainage infrastructure. The proposal also includes the provision of a footpath link from the site along the Chapel Road frontage and linking into the village's existing paved footpath network at Mayfield Way, which is adjacent to the south east of the site. The proposal would also implement sustainability energy efficiency measures agreed in principle with your environmental protection officers. In terms of background and history, the application follows a previous application for 49 dwellings on the site, which was refused by committee on the 16th of October last year, for the reasons that it was considered contrary to Plan Policy MP1, that's of the neighbourhood plan, which prefers proposals of 20 dwellings or less in such locations which are outside of but immediately adjacent to the existing village settlement boundary. Furthermore, it was considered contrary to Policy MP1 on the grounds that the indicative layout presented for the 49 dwellings was not considered appropriate and sympathetic to the area and not sufficiently cohesive with the existing village. Members considered the proposal did not make good use of planting and softening to the edges of the development, and the new dwellings were not considered to demonstrate efficiency, energy usage, and use of renewable energy. And your officers consider that the current proposal to have sufficiently addressed the reasons previously given for refusal. The proposal is now for 20 dwellings, which we consider satisfies Plan Policy MP1. There is a significant amount of soft landscaping, which is now proposed to the northwest side of the site, creating a soft green buffer to this edge of the village. And a sustainability energy scheme has been proposed and accepted by your environmental protection officers, as I mentioned earlier, which would exceed building regulations, reducing energy demand by approximately 64%. It adopts a fabric-first approach to reduce carbon emissions, and solar panels, air source heat pumps would be used for primary sources of heating, and garages would be equipped with electric charging points. So if I move to the presentation, I'll try that, get that on the screen for you. Hopefully this works. Starting the slideshow from the beginning. And may I ask if you can see that, Chairman, and everybody else?
Yes, I can. Just everybody, just tell us if they can't.
I hope they can, Chairman. But I'll move through the presentation now. And
just before you do that, Alex, if you turn off your own video, because that did in testing,
yes, of
that
course.
worked a bit better. Sorry to interrupt, Chair.
I will do that now, Robert. Turning off video. Right.
Is there any possibility of making the presentation bigger, or is this just my?
No, that's what it is, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll start from the beginning of the presentation. So this is the initial page, giving the application number and the site location. A little bit slow on my screen, apologies. And this first slide is the site location for the avoidance of doubt, the location of the village of Mendlesham within the district. This slide is the general location of the site within the village itself. So we have the A140 here, Mendlesham village, so it's to the north of the village there. And this is the exact site location in the context of its surrounds, adjacent to existing developments fronting the opposite side of Chapel Road here and at Mayfield Way here, this existing development. This is a constraints map of the village and the area of the site. The site itself is edged in red. The blue line here represents the settlement boundary as defined in the current development plan. the thick blue areas define flood risk zones as specified by the Environment Agency. The purple line is the boundary of the village conservation area. And the coloured buildings, you may be able to see, those are listed buildings. Now, Grade 1 listed buildings, such as the church, shown in green. Grade 2 star buildings are shown in red. And the orange colour denotes Grade 2 listed buildings. And the most relevant one is here that you just might be able to see. I've got a closer up image later, but that's a thatched cottage known as Calves Pigtail, which is on the opposite side of the road to the development. Moving on, okay. Slide 6. So this is a aerial photograph of the site and area. This is the site location plan submitted with the application. And this is the indicative site plan provided. Now, it's important to note that matters of layout and landscaping are presently reserved. And this is indicative information only showing how it could work. But matters of access are for full consideration. And I have a close-up of the proposed access, and you might just be able to see the connecting footway across the existing roadside verge linking into Mayfield Way here, which is part of the proposal. And the listed building, Grade 2, is in this location here for you. Some street scene elevations, but these again are indicative. They're not for full consideration today, but just for information on how such a scheme may look. Onto the site photographs. This is the Chapel Road site frontage, and the location of the proposed access will be in this location, adjacent to the existing public footpath, which runs along the southeast boundary of the site, between that and Mayfield Way. This is a reverse view looking back into the village, and this is the listed building here at Calves Pigtail. This is the interior of the site frontage, looking back across the field where the development is proposed, and to the buildings adjacent to the edge of the village existing. And along here is a line of trees, and beyond that to the left is the main highway. And this is a view back to the start of the public right-of-way. And then as it continues along the existing edge of the village here, and we have existing landscape screening, high hedges, and a ditch which runs along this boundary, drainage ditch. This is taken from the rear of the site, and the existing footpath here, and screening, and back towards the Chapel Road frontage. And you might be able to make out existing buildings across the road frontage. And this is from the northeast corner of the site to the rear, looking back towards the dwellings along Mayfield Way in the distance, just poking out above the existing screening there. Some larger two-storey buildings at the back of the estate there. And to the street scene, this is the existing building listed, Grade 2 listed, Calves Pigtail, and adjacent to it is a building which is not listed, but your heritage officers considered to be a non-designated heritage asset, Cottage, significant age and character, it is believed. This is taken from the entrance to Mayfield Way, adjacent to the site. Then looking back towards the village, give you some idea of the existing character, and then back into Mayfield Way itself, which would be adjacent to the proposed development. This is an aerial view of the site and area, and this is the field in question here on the edge of the village. And this is the old Engine Meadow site, which has approval for 28 dwellings in outline form, with reserve matters still to be considered. And in terms of updates, it's been brought to my attention that since writing the report, 3 letters in support of the application have indeed been received, and that's been confirmed. And in summary, representatives think that this is much needed development of small houses and bungalows available to perhaps first-time buyers and those wishing to downsize. It proposes a large amount of public open space to the edge of the village. Writers consider it has minimal impact on the village. They support the sustainable approach. Writers do not consider the proposal would result in significant traffic issues. They consider the development to be well positioned, and the proposal is noted to be close to the village health centre, and it's considered that this would be of benefit to families and the elderly in particular. And for the avoidance of doubt, your officers have considered your officers and your consultees, in fact, have considered the SCA scoping and environmental report and traffic movement report documents produced by the Neighbourhood Planning Group in forming the formal recommendation before you today. And this is set out in the report for you. And your officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to completion of section 106 and conditions as set out in your report papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. So can we move to questions from the members of the planning officer, please? So Councillor Warboys, would you like to have any questions for the officer, please? That's it.
That's it, yeah. Yes, so to be clear here, originally the officer's recommendation was to refuse this, but has the number of houses has been reduced and there's been better standards being proposed with regards to energy efficiency, then the officer's recommendation now is to accept the application, to approve the application.
Yes, I mean the previous application for 49 was considered by members at committee, and it was the members' recommendation. Actually, contrary to officer recommendation at that time, but that shouldn't matter. It's the council's decision at the end of the day, and that set out the reasons for refusal. Officers have assessed that as part of as a material consideration in coming to the recommendations with respect to this application, and it's considered that the reasons previously given for refusal have been suitably addressed.
Okay, thank you.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Stringer, as ward member. Councillor Norris, do you have any questions?
Yes, just the one. Is Chapel Road, off which this development is proposed, subject to a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit?
Yes, I believe it is, yes.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mellon, do you have questions for the officer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. Just looking at the indicative layout, it seems to show that the existing public right-of-way is being retained in its existing form. That's correct, is it?
Yes, in fact, improvements have been advised by Suffolk County Council, and we expect those to be carried forward. So it will be retained and improved. That's the proposal.
Thank you. The second question I had was on slide 5 in your presentation. I don't know if you're allowed to show that again, or it's possible to show that again.
Yeah, sorry, I'll try and get it back up for you. Slide 5, constraints map. Yes, yes.
Well, I can't see it at the moment, but anyway, the question is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies. Right, I need to represent, and hopefully that's from current slide. There we go. Are you able to see that now, Councillor?
It hasn't come through yet. I can ask my question anyway. My question was: it seems to be a little out of date, that slide. I believe there's been quite a considerable amount of development of what is the road called? Old Station Road, I think. To the west of Old Station Road, there's a development there which doesn't seem to have appeared on your map.
No, indeed, this is a rather old map, and it has not been updated yet. But yeah, the development in question, was to the to the west of Old Station Road, on the old GR warehousing site, I believe, and that is currently underdeveloped and nearing completion, I understand. But yes, there may be a few developments since this was published. I don't have an exact date of when this was, but yes. Apologies. There's little I can do about that, I'm afraid. Just to point out, from my knowledge, where those developments would be.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. Councillor Humphreys, any questions for the officer?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gould, any questions for the officer?
Thanks. First, a more technical question, which I think I know the answer to, but I just want to be certain, which is the Mendlesham neighbourhood plan is being reviewed at the moment, but there's an existing adopted neighbourhood plan. Is this? Well, I just wanted to check on the status of the adopted neighbourhood plan. Presumably that remains in force and until and unless replaced.
Okay, if I could perhaps defer to the area planning manager to answer that point, please.
I'm aware. Oh, crumbs! I'm hearing myself. Hang on, one wait. Try again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. It went back on myself. I could hear myself very loudly. I don't like the sound of my voice, I must admit. I have got something prepared to talk about in respect of the current neighbourhood plan and the revised neighbourhood plan. Now, I can go through that now if Chairman wishes me to, or I can come in later. I'm happy to answer that in its entirety.
Well, I think I would like the ward member to give us the full views first, and then perhaps if Peter could bear with us and the question might be answered both with the ward members' input and then the senior planning manager, area planning manager later. Would that be okay with you, Peter, Councillor Gould?
Absolutely, very, very happy for that.
Yeah.
Just one other matter. Could we be advised of the grade of the agricultural land involved in the site? I mean, it's described in the representation section as prime agricultural land. I wonder if that could just be clarified, please. Thank you.
Yes, I think, could you look into that for us and give us an update at shortly after, Alex, please? Unless you know it now.
Chairman, I'm just looking at it right now. I can look that up and I'll give you the answer in a few minutes.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much for that, Councillor Gould. Now, Councillor Caston, do you have some questions, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A little bit concerned this development that's happened in this village that we can't see on the map. I would like to the officer to point that out so it's absolutely clear to me where this development's carried out. I've kind of I don't know the road names and that round Mendlesham, and I'd like to know where that is for this decision. The other thing I wonder if I could talk about is the suds, the swale at the end of the development that backs onto potentially the floodplain of the I assume it's the Gippin coming through the you know that sud side of the development. Do we know what the issues could possibly be with that floodplain being right beside a suds? If the system, if the water level rises high enough, it would potentially flood that the suds in a time when the suds is desperately needed to get water runoff away from the development, and obviously that would only happen at a time when the water level is very high in the Gippin. Do you have any more information on how that would work? I've seen the assessment, that the flood risk assessment, but I just consider that quite close to that swale.
Okay, so a couple of points there. I'll try and get the map up again for you so we can try and explain where a few of the developments may be. Share my screen. Okay, are you able to see that, Councillor, the map of the village?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, so current developments down here, there has been approved. That's gone through outline and reserve matters and is currently being built. What's known as the GR warehousing site. So approximately this scale of new housing. And there's been an outline application approved for development south of Glebe Way here, although we still need reserved matters through on that one. And there's been I think two dwellings approved along the road in this location as well. And up here at what's known as Old Engine Meadow, there is an outline approval for 28 dwellings, but that is in outline form at the moment, and we still need reserve matters on that one. So I believe just one significant development in addition to what you can see there at the moment. The others are in outline approval form only, and we still need follow-on reserve matters. So those will may be coming forward in the future. And elsewhere, a little bit of infill development, which I don't have the comprehensive list, I'm afraid. But I think those are the significant ones, if that's helpful. If I can move to the.
sorry, you couldn't just point out the A14 direction from that map there?
Yes, indeed. Yes, if we can come to the wider view. So we have Mendlesham here. The A14 is runs here through the village. Sorry, no, through the district. Sorry. And the A140 runs north to south, connecting the A14 to Norfolk and Norwich.
Have you been able to see that, James? You can just see the
no, I've got
space
that.
goes quite small, but
No, I can see from my map here, and I understand that now. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
And Councillor Caston, did you have the issue regarding the location of the Suds and the Swale? Did you have that sufficiently answered for you?
Well, no, not really. I'm not sure if there's what my worry is that there's an engineering issue there with a floodplain and a SUD system. I'd quite like someone to tell me that there isn't, or explain that a bit further.
Right. Well, I mean, what I can tell you is we've had a comprehensive strategic flood risk assessment completed by the applicant. This has gone to the local lead flood authority at Suffolk County Council for consideration. Now, all the sustainability drainage infrastructure will be suitably attenuated and allowed to drain to ground naturally. And the main SUDS feature is the attenuation basin you can see here. Now that is indicative in terms of location and scale at the moment, but it just gives an idea of what the proposal could be. And we are dealing with matters of principle at the moment. And flood risk and surface water drainage have been considered in principle, and the advice of the local lead flood authority is that it's acceptable, subject to further conditions of detail, which we were able to secure by way of conditions. So it has been considered and addressed in principle is all I can say there.
Yes, helpful. Thank you for that, Alex. I mean, it does say that on page 23 that it's subject to conditions. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor Caston.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Right, I don't have any questions, but I will come back. Councillor Stringer, do you have any questions for the officer at all?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I have three. One, you made comment about letters of support. Are they on top of the letter of support coming in from Norwich Road, Claydon in January? Because they're not on the website. And if you mention them in your presentation, it would be nice for us to be able to have been able to access them.
Okay, these were these were brought to my attention yesterday, actually. In terms of them being on the website, I mean, it's my understanding that we don't usually post third-party letters. Can I just ask the area
afraid
planning?
We do.
You're afraid we do. Can I just check that with the? Well, I'll check that with the area manager.
If I may come in, Chairman. No, we don't actually put all letters received on the website. There are reasons that we don't do that. The basis that sometimes they are accusational, and we would be liable for that. So we don't always place all letters on the website. It also depends on the format that they come in. Sometimes they come online through the web. Sometimes they come via an email. Sometimes they come in the post. And it does depend on the time between the submission and going on the website in terms of how the support team have been able to redact the information. So, of course, we can't put certain sensitive data protection information online, the person's signature, for example, that put on the third party. So no, it is actually a discretionary matter of putting all letters on the website. But saying that, we try to wherever we can. Alex, though, what I need from you is, can you just confirm the exact number of support and objections for me, just to confirm that once and for all, please?
Yes, I can. If you just bear with me. I believe we have 3 letters of support in total. That's including the ones I was made aware of yesterday. If I can just double check I'm just looking at the report now. Just double checking the number I said in the report. So that. Yes, 24 letters of concern or objection, as set out in the report, and 3 letters of support in total. Thank you.
And just before we go into, sorry, forgive me, Councillor, before we go into your further questions, just to confirm from an earlier question, the land in terms of agricultural use, I've got as grade 3, but I'm not aware of any specific survey on the land. That's the general allocation of grade across the area, and the majority of it is grade 3. Thank you.
And Councillor Stringer,
yeah.
Do you think those 3 of support include the ones that you were referring to?
Well, there's one that we've published on our website, and that comes from Norwich Road, Claydon, and not that it's a race about how many people object or support, but support from Claydon, I probably don't give quite as much weight as support from an address right opposite the site.
Well, Councillor Stringer, I think we know we get lots of letters from all over the place.
We do.
I think the officers take a pragmatic view of the content.
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted, and of course, the members can't see the content, and that's why I asked the question.
Yeah. And your other question, if you would.
Yes, there are. I've got 2 others. Your report, your presentation mentioned a footpath link to the services of Mendlesham. Now, the footpath link that you demonstrated was not the one being asked by condition by the officer on page 51. On page 51, the officer is asked that they would require a footway linked to Duxon Road to make a continuous link to bus stops, facilities and the primary school. I mean, my reading of the word continuous link would need road crossings. Have you seen a plan of this continuous link at all? Because if our officers are asking for it to be conditioned and you haven't shown us that link in your presentation, there is some ambiguity there, which I think needs to be in front of members.
Put the plan up, Alex, and then we can look at it and see what Councillor Stringer is advising us.
Yes, of course, yes. Right, so let's share again. Right, so as I understand, what is part of the proposal would be a footpath link along the road frontage here to Mayfield Way, and then that in turn would link through to the existing footpath network to the centre of the village. That's my understanding of what's on the table.
But Alex, it doesn't. That's the problem. It would require an awful lot of engineering to have a continuous link to Duxon Road. And that's what the officer's asking for you to insist upon.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I take that point, but I believe this is the proposal. Yeah.
Fine, okay. Can I, my last question, have the officers taken into account the impact of approving this application on the published amendment of Mendlesham Neighbourhood Plan?
May I come on this one, Chairman?
Yes, I think this would be something that would help us all. Yes, please. Thank you.
Right, just in respect of the footpath, I respectfully also will point out to members that we have an outline approval for Mason's Court opposite this site. That outline approval includes direct linkage to the village, and that is part of the agreement of that application. So in terms of material consideration, that is a significant material consideration in terms of connectivity, because it will be available through that outline, which I understand is an allocation in the future, will be through that outline to get to the village, as well as the link to Mayfield Way within this proposal and supported by Suffolk County Council. So I will just put that in for members' consideration later in the debate. In terms of the neighbourhood plan, the simple answer is yes, we have considered the revised neighbourhood plan as well as the current neighbourhood plan. And again, I'm happy to go through that in detail if this is the opportune moment to do that.
Yes, I think you should at the moment, because with respect to Councillor Stringer, he's brought this issue up and I think we need to address it for him. But I think, Councillor Stringer, you'll see you're not in the debate. You'll talk to us when you get to your bit.
Absolutely. Could I, before we move on to that, can I just, there was a statement made about the footpath, which is actually completely untrue. This site is not opposite Mayfield Way. Sorry, not opposite Mason Court. You cannot walk on a footpath from this site to Mason Court. I'm very sorry. We need to get the maps up and look at this. It's absolutely critical, because there was advice from our policy officers about this particular site regarding connectivity that the county council is trying to address, and the plans before us at the moment do not.
Okay. We can put, can you put the plans up, please, Alex?
I can put the plans up again, certainly. Right, so we have the
you need to probably go for one a bit wider if possible. That's the link to along the road itself.
Yeah, we have a footpath up to this point, indicative, of course.
No, you're quite right, Councillor. It's not directly opposite in the context of there is two properties opposite that you have to kind of go round in order to get into the old Mason's Court site. I withdraw that comment. You would need to cross the road at that point, and I accept I'm not aware that there's a footpath for that short piece of land there. I don't know how wide that would be. 20-30 metres? Is that satisfactory?
I'm sorry, John, you've got that wrong again. You're pointing to the entrance to the health centre, which is gated. That's not the footpath you're talking about.
Okay, I have to go back over the outline permission for the Old Engine Meadows site then.
Yeah, please do. It's important we get this right.
For the time being, to allow this to go forward, let's just accept that the current application in what it is proposing is simply the connection along Chapel Road itself, which would then lead into the village via that route, which is before you on screen.
Yeah, and if the officer could show that route from Mayfield Way into the village via a footpath, that would be really helpful.
Alex, can you, I assume you can go from a footpath all the way from the entrance of this site through to some part of the village. Where you stop, I don't know.
Not without crossing the road. There is no footpath
you would have to
from
cross
the
road,
south of Mayfield Way. There is no footpath on either side of the road south of
I think
Way.
Councillor Stringer, you've made your point on that, but I mean, many villages you have to cross roads to get to places, but the connectivity, shall we say, from your point of view, is lean and lesser than you had hoped. Is that would that be a correct?
And that was the original policy response from our council.
Yeah. Okay. So the highways have accepted it in their plans at the moment, and the planning officer has been given the details thus far. So
yeah,
one
Chair,
presumes
that's exactly
what we've got
exactly
before
what I
us.
said. No, that's exactly what I said. The officer at the county council has asked for it to go further, and I was questioning how far it is going to go. That's what I was questioning.
Can I just also make one further point? And I appreciate we might be steering into debate slightly here.
Yes, I don't want to do that at this stage.
Okay, it was not a reason for refusal on the previous application, and I will be careful on that point when we come to the debate.
Okay, I think you've made the point there, Councillor Stringer, and that will be food for thought in the debate, as you quite rightly point out, John. Moving on from questions, thank you for those questions, Councillor Stringer. Can we move on to the public speakers now, please? And we have the Parish Council representative, Mr. Michael Exley, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee, if you would, please. And you may please turn on your video, and then we can see who you are.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Thank you. Mendlesham Parish Council have already given a full response to this planning application, recommending refusal, so I will only dwell on a few points, particularly the Suffolk County Council response of the 20th of January, which again is referring to Mr. Stringer's comments. They require a footway link to Duxton Road to make a continuous link to bus stops, facilities and the school, and they suggest a condition that a footway is to be provided in its entirety before the development is brought into use. Mendlesham Parish Council have continuously raised in its responses the doubt that such a condition can be fulfilled in its entirety. Should we not have clear documentation that this footpath is possible with clearly identified land ownership for its whole length, showing that this land is under control of the applicant? At the moment, all we have is a red line on a map. It may well be that such a condition is undeliverable and therefore the site itself undeliverable. There was also a Suffolk County Council response of the 5th of February regarding the flood risks. Now, this site actually flows into the River Dove catchment. It already takes all the surface water from Chapel Road, and Old Engine Meadow, which is by the health centre you've already discussed, also will be putting water into the Dove above this site. We don't seem to have a very detailed flood risk assessment on this site. Should this also not be resolved before planning approval is given? Just to mention a couple of inaccuracies in the officer's report. Number 1/5, no bus stop exists in Chapel Road. 5.5, Chapel Road at the southern end is within the conservation area. The historic conservation area is the Church Road, Chapel Road, and Old Market Street and Front Street. All traffic from this site must pass through the conservation area. Mendlesham's revised neighbourhood plan SEA document is given weight by the officers in this and recommending approval of this site. Yet this same document also supports our alternative allocated site to the south of the parish, which contains such factors as less flood risk, good footpaths, close to extensive play areas, school and less traffic through the conservation area. This makes our alternative site far more preferable. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So, do members have questions for Mr. Exley? Councillor Warvoice?
No questions at this moment.
Councillor Norris? Councillor Norris, do you have any questions for Mr. Exley?
Sorry, I hadn't unmuted my mic. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mellon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one question. This is a reference to the Parish Council's submission in writing. Can you confirm the number of homes which have received permission in Mendlesham already prior to this application?
I think at the last count we were up actually to about 107.
Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Gould?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Caston?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Exley.
And thank you, Mr. Exley. I don't have any questions for you. So if you would now like to switch off your video and continue to listen to the meeting. Thank you very much. Did you switch off your video, Councillor, Mr. Exley?
It tells me it's turned off, but is it not turned off?
No, I can see you loud and clear.
Oh, okay, I'll try again.
Thank you very much. That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you.
So now we have an objector, Mr. Terry Moore, to speak. Would you like to turn your video on, please? And can we hear you for 3 minutes, if you would, please? Thank you very much.
Right, good morning. Mendlesham, through its adopted neighbourhood development plan, has already demonstrated its commitment to new development. Its current plan target of 75 new dwellings for the period 2016 to 2031 has already been met and surpassed to over 100 dwellings. We started a review of our adopted plan in 2017, identifying possible future sites. In October that year, we consulted with our residents on possible sites. Overwhelmingly, a site to the south of the village adjacent to Glebe Way was selected. The Chapel Road site was identified as the least desirable. Since then, our Neighbourhood Planning Committee spent a considerable amount of time, effort and finance to confirm the most suitable sites for further future development. On the advice of Mid-Suffolk officers, we commissioned external professional organisations to provide detailed assessments of all possible development sites. That work is now complete, and a draft revised emerging neighbourhood development plan is publicly available on the Parish Council's website. The current draft joint local plan has a target minimum of 161 new properties for the period April 2018 to 2036. Mendlesham's emerging plan shows in detail how that figure will be met and surpassed. Mendlesham residents do not support the Chapel Road site. The ever-increasing traffic flows are affecting the historic core of our village, its conservation area. The Chapel Road site does nothing to improve that situation. It will worsen it by the introduction of yet more traffic. Pedestrian access to the site is not straightforward, and the problems with local flooding persist. The primary aim of our emerging plan is to show clearly where future development will be best placed. Residents have clearly indicated that further development should be to the south of the village, adjacent to Glebe Way. It is frustrating that officers are ignoring the bigger picture presented in our emerging plan and also echoed in our responses to the draft joint local plan. Residents recognise the need for ongoing development and have willingly participated in the work that has led to the production of the emerging plan. It should also be noted that Mendlesham has now set up its own community land trust, identifying a potential site at Mendlesham Green for up to 10 new dwellings. This is not NIMBYism, nor is it a reluctance to accept change. It is simply a community putting forward a clear programme on how it wants to comply with local planning and development for the future. I ask that you acknowledge their commitment and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Mr. Moore? Councillor Warboys?
Sorry, there we go. I am very concerned about the deliverability of this plan. Councillor Stringer has already talked a little bit about the footpath. Have you got the delivery of the footpath into the town. Have you got anything that you could add to that at all?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Sorry, it was Councillor Stringer talked about the possibility of the footpath connecting this site into the centre of Mendlesham. Have you got anything to add to that at all in terms of your neighbourhood plan?
No, I don't think we have. I mean, we've looked at that particular site. The footpath is just one aspect of it. Personally, I think that footpath is going to be very difficult to deliver, and it's the type of thing that really, to properly explore it, probably needs a site visit, which we're not going to do today. But it is about the importance of access into the centre of the village, and whilst as the crow flies, it's very close to the centre of the village, I have no doubt. Unfortunately, residents don't have the abilities of crows to get there, and they have to negotiate crossing several different roads to really get to a point where they can access the centre of the village. And even access to the local surgery would be difficult. The road there is narrowing, it's on a long sweeping bend. It's not one of the safest places around the village.
We've got to be careful that we're not entering into debate here. We want thank you for your fulsome reply. Obviously primed to give us your full reply there. So where are we now? Councillor, sorry, that was Councillor Mellon, was it? No, that was Councillor Warboys. So Councillor Norris?
No, thank you. No question as such. I'll wait for the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mellon?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Humphreys?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Gould?
No questions, thank you.
And Councillor Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Moore, you mentioned existing flooding issues in the village. You couldn't just talk to us a little bit about those, sticking to facts?
Well, hang on a minute. We can't have a debate here, Councillor Caston. A very brief response, please. What are the known floods? I think it's already been addressed in the debate in the papers, but a very brief response, please.
I think, shall we say, the area around the chip, from sort of the chip shop down to the surgery, the doctor's surgery, well known for frequent flooding. We are constantly told that it is easy to rectify, but it still keeps happening.
Right, thank you for that. And that's a current situation that we obviously don't want to exacerbate, but equally we can't sort from this development on a current matter. So a question from Councillor Stringer, if you would, please.
I have no questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. We don't have, thank you very much, Mr. Moore, if you'd like to switch your video off now, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you. We don't have a supporter, so I now ask the applicant, David Barker, to speak. You have 3 minutes to address the committee, and I know you've got 2 other people there, but I think if you give us your presentation, and then when the questions come up, and again, please be wary that we're not going into debate on it, it's just clarity and quick questions, please. Thank you. So off you go, Mr. Barker. Thank you.
Good morning. Following the last committee, this proposal has been reduced from 49 to 20 homes with 2 acres of public open space, giving a well-landscaped entrance to the village. This is 4 times more public open space than the earlier proposal. The open space will be in the most prominent western part of the site. This site will be developed at a lower density compared to the old Engine Meadow site opposite, which was approved for 28 homes in 2018. A planning condition can be used to require that reserved matters follow the principles of this outline application. The adopted impact. This proposal is supported by an energy statement, which shows significant reductions in energy usage of up to 64% can be achieved compared to current building regulations. This commitment goes well beyond anything proposed on other housing sites in Mendlesham or in the existing or draft neighbourhood plans. These measures can be required by a condition to ensure the final scheme is sustainable. The adopted neighbourhood plan requires that sufficient infrastructure is provided for new homes. No objections have been received from the consultees on education or health, who will receive or section. Our highways consultant says that he's carried out 3 traffic surveys, including one in February, well before lockdown. These show that at peak times, Old Market Street will only have 3 extra vehicles an hour, and Front Street an extra 4 vehicles an hour. Construction traffic can be routed away from these areas. These are minimal increases in traffic. New footways will provide a pedestrian link into the village, best benefiting existing and new residents. And these are shown in the submitted highways report that comes with this application in appendices B and C. These show the highways boundary and the route of the new footpath that would link to Mayfield Way and existing footpaths in that area. This report has been application and has been considered in their response, which is a one of support subject to conditions. Drainage engineer says the site can be properly drained and fully meets county standards. The site is downstream of the nearby 28 home site, so will not affect that site. The large area of landscape frontage will be framed by homes to give an attractive edge to the village. Approaching the village, Old Engine Meadow will be seen first and will be prominent in views towards the village. This proposal complies with the adopted neighbourhood plan, which wants to see small developments around the edge of the village, which this is. The emerging neighbourhood plan has little weight at this point. However, its policies would also permit this development. The last application on this site was refused as weight could not be given to the draft district plan. So weight cannot now be given to a very early draft neighbourhood plan to object to this proposal, and the adopted plan is the basis for decision making. This is the most sustainably designed and well-landscaped development of this scale that I've been involved with for other schemes in the area. I'm happy to answer any questions and have our clients' highways and drainage engineers with me to assist you if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get to questions, we did sort of lose you here and there, but we did get most of the, I got most of the words. Can I just ask my fellow committee members just to say if they're happy with what they've heard and they heard it sufficiently well enough? If you didn't, let me know, but if you did, just a few seconds to say, right, I think we got most of what you heard. Thank you. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. There were just a few moments that it locked a little. So can we have questions for the applicants? And I'll go first to Councillor Warboys, please.
Right. Yes, thank you, Chairman. You mentioned Appendix C, which has did you? It was a little bit unclear, but did you infer that there was drawings to show the actual footpaths linking this site to the village?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good. Yes, it was a little faint, Councillor Warboys, but I think I got the gist of your question. So forgive me if I don't answer it completely. Yes, I made the point in my presentation that this application is supported by a highway statement, which has 2 appendices, appendices B and C. Those show the adopted the highways boundary, and they also show a plan prepared by a highways consultant that shows a new footpath linking to the existing footpath at Mayfield Way. That report is obviously part of the application and was considered by highways officers when they gave their consultation response to this application. So I hope that provides some of the clarity that you're looking for on those footpath links.
Thank you for that. It certainly does for me. Councillor Warboys, is that all right? Can we move on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warboys. Councillor Norris, any questions for the applicant?
No further questions, thank you.
Councillor Mellon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a question. Just going back and trying to sort of dig a bit deeper on this access and footpath issue. I don't feel we have the appendices in the bundle, but what we do have is the 20th of January letter from Suffolk County Council Highways, which requests a footway link to Duxon Road. And I'm still not entirely clear in my mind that the applicant or you as the agent will be able to provide that. It's so about 2/3 of the way down page 51 in the bundle.
Yes, I can help with that. And if I have my highways consultant, Andrew Bingham, with me, so maybe if Andrew, you could help if there's anything I miss.
Well, we just need a brief response to this.
Okay. Yeah. What Andrew Bingham has designed is a new footway that goes on land that he's been advised is within the highway boundary that links to an existing footway at Mayfield Way. You would reach that footway, you would then cross Mayfield Way to get to a footway on the other side, and then you would cross the road, and that would get you to the footway at Duxton Road. So it's possible to go from the site to Duxton Road on footways, and we did have a pre-application meeting with highways officers where they made this request and asked us to design this, and that is what we carried out as part of this application. So I'm confident that they're aware of this and that they're happy with this.
Thank you for that. So any further questions on that?
No, I assume Councillor Stringer will come in with some clarification on that. I'm not entirely convinced from the photos we've been shown that there is.
Well, that's for debate. You've asked your question. Let's move on.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Humphreys?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Gould?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wonder if I would be able to just ask a quick question of the drainage representative he's got there, because it is quite a crucial point to me now. I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about this.
Well, what's your question, and can we just have a quick response? Thank you.
Right, okay.
It needs to be clear. I understand that.
Yes, okay. So in the modelling of this flood risk, has the fact that Suds is located adjacent to a floodplain been taken into consideration with the modelling, considering that is loamy clay soil with impeded drainage in the first place?
And that should be a quick answer, really, yes or no.
Yes. I think briefly Richard Wisdale, who's the expert on this, would respond.
As the drainage engineer, I can say yes, it's the basin will be located in flood zone 1, so it is outside of the floodplain.
Okay, but will that impede its operation if it is in a flood zone and it's flooded?
No, because it is outside the flood zone. The basin is outside of the flood zone.
Right.
It's
okay.
On the edge of it, but outside of it.
And how far is it away? Could I just ask?
It would be right on the edge of it. So it's on the edge of flood zone 1, but it is outside. So it's outside the 1 in 100 year floodplain.
Right, that's answered your question for you to consider now, Councillor Caston, if you would. Yeah, okay. So I don't have any questions. All the questions are being asked. So I now come to Councillor Stringer, and if you would like to tell us about this application. Thank you, Councillor Stringer.
Yes, I will.
And if Mr. Barker can just delete his video, that would be super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, all along, Mendlesham has sought to deliver all that Mid Suffolk and the government has asked for in terms of housing delivery. And to date, Mendlesham has more than delivered on all requirements from every single policymaker. It has, in just over 3 years into its first neighbourhood plan in Mid Suffolk, exceeded its requirement, not just for housing approvals, but completions. We've delivered these houses. On the face of it, agreeing with today's report looks at first glance quite a simple step. However, in more than one significant area, our officers have not taken into account major policy areas that the Secretary of State and countless appeal and inspections have ruled upon. That is the impact of a development on an emerging neighbourhood plan and the successful delivery of houses. They're both material considerations, and they certainly haven't been addressed within the documentation. Mendlesham has for 3 years now been working on its allocations policy to update their neighbourhood plan and make it compliant with the joint local plan, emerging joint local plan, and further government pronouncements. So after results of many public consultations and countless reports based on expert evidence, published their allocations policy, which is in line with their submissions to the joint local plan and in line with local feeling. But despite requests, the content of this published emerging neighbourhood plan policy has not been put in front of you, the decision makers, which is deeply disappointing. Hours of work by paid consultants, volunteers and public consultations forming a consensus as to where the future of housing and development should be has been basically ignored. So how do we square this circle? Because we have a number of policies to balance here and we need to bring them into balance. After all, we have a village here, like many others, is just trying to use their resources to put the demand for development in the right place. So it, one, can be delivered, and two, have the least impact on our ability to keep delivering sufficient homes into the future. Government inspectors and the Secretary of State actually do help us here. I've been having a look through where there have been other decisions at appeal and Secretary of State level where there have been emerging neighbourhood plans. This is pre-referendum. This isn't just an amendment to a neighbourhood plan, this is a whole emerging neighbourhood plan. And actually, the findings from the Secretary of State and appeal inspectors is quite clear. At Wellingborough Council, the Secretary of State ruled that proposals would undermine the intentions of a neighbourhood plan. And the Secretary of State gave greater weight than that of his inspector to an emerging plan and dismissed the appeal. Broughton Ashley, an inspector allowed a development for 111 homes, but the Secretary of State quashed the decision, overruling the inspector's decision, stating that significant weight be applied to it conflicting with the emerging pre-referendum neighbourhood plan. Rendlesham, here in Suffolk, inspector ruled that proposals conflict with emerging neighbourhood plans and significantly undermine their objectives and ruled it be dismissed. Wiltshire Council refused 77 homes. The Secretary of State refused the application despite there being a lack of 5-year land supply and stating the community had completed a site selection process, which Mendlesham has done, and the immediate benefit of releasing the land is insufficient to justify the release of this site so soon before the examination of the neighbourhood plan is carried out. Cheshire and Chester, the inspector identified that emerging plans do demonstrate how sufficient housing could be provided, and the Secretary of State agreed with his inspector and refused the appeal. In Mendlesham, they have shown precisely how and where we can deliver more than the houses required in our neighbourhood plan and our joint local plan, but not if this application gains approval. Your officers will suggest that no policy reason exists for refusal, yet case after case supports the views of local residents, their neighbourhood plan team, professional consultants, and the Secretary of State's very clear that damage to an emerging neighbourhood plan is sufficient to uphold a refusal at appeal and even judicial review. I would ask, if you wish to save this successful local neighbourhood plan, you must refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Stringer? Councillor Warboys.
No questions. Thank you.
Councillor Norris.
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Mellon.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Humphreys.
Yes, Madam Chair, I do, thank you. And I need some clarity, actually, which I'm hoping that Mr. Painter will jump in and help. You keep going on about the emerging local plan, but the significant weight is obviously given to the adopted neighbourhood plan. And I do understand that you do have an emerging revision of that local plan, and that has some weight, but not as much weight as an adopted one. For clarity, for all the members present, and for the people of the public, I would like Mr. Peyton G, if it's possible, Chair, to actually show the difference between the current adopted neighbourhood plan that has significant weight and a revision, to see if there is any effect on this actual development plan.
Well, I hear what you say. That wasn't exactly a question to Councillor Stringer, so I apologise.
Well, the question was that he must agree that that the adopted neighbourhood plan has significant weight and more weight than an emerging plan. That's a fact, and a question, which I think you'll agree with. Okay, if you don't, I'd still like some clarity, because the ward member has stood up and spoken about the emerging plan, how important it is, and yet we've not seen it.
Right.
Can I answer, Chair? Can I answer?
That
was actually my point. What I wanted to do was for you to be able to see all that documentation. I've begged our officers to put that in front of you. It is already published. It's public domain. I've begged them to give you that documentation because you are the decision maker. And as far as I'm concerned, I think you need that information so you can balance the judgment yourself. The Secretary of State has done it before.
Yeah, hang on. We'll go into debate on that, Councillor Stringer. But what I would say is we do not put neighbourhood plans before every planning application, I'm afraid. And that is a fact. We don't. They are available. And I hear your passion and I want to hear the debate going forward and taking on all your views. So, Councillor Humphreys, I hear your point and we will come to that. But I think you did put it to a question and Councillor Stringer disagreed with your thoughts on that. Councillor Gould?
Thank you.
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Caston?
No questions, Madam Chair.
And I don't have any questions on that. But I think it is a good point to bring in John Pateman-G to explain to us what's going on with the neighbourhood plan and his interpretation of that so that we can listen and see what's what. Thank you.
Thank you. I will admit, because this is going to sound like I'm reading this, and I am reading this because I did take some thought about this to write it down. So I didn't want to do my normal thing and try and go all over the place. So I'm going to be admitting up front that I've written this all down and I'm going to read this to you to make sure that I am clear, concise, and, you know, if there is any challenge in the future, that this is very clear. So let's look at the neighbourhood plan and policy. The current neighbourhood plan policy has significant weight. It is part of your development plan. The same with local plan 1998, core strategy, focus review. The policy MP1 of the neighbourhood plan sets out the neighbourhood plan's housing policy. In summary, it provides, and I believe we might have some slides with this on, but I'll leave them.
Andrew, could you just take your video off and we can get the slides up, please? Sorry to interrupt.
I'll leave that with Alex while I'm talking. It provides a minimum total of 75 houses. By being minimal, this is not a cap. There is nothing in the policy to prevent housing in excess of 75. And as been talked about earlier, more houses have been developed in Mendlesham than the 75. Secondly, it provides that any significant figure increase, significant is not defined, to this housing figure will need to demonstrate that existing local services will be able to cope, or appropriate measures by condition or legal agreement and so on will be provided. On this basis, we consider that the proposal before us, if it's considered significant, there is no objection in this regard. Conditions have been recommended and SIL is also in place. The policy also goes on to say that support shall be given within the settlement boundary for new development, but it doesn't provide an opposite for outside the boundary and goes on to provide that outside the settlement boundary, that individual proposals that are immediately adjacent to the boundary to develop small sites of sustainable new homes will be supported. The reference of small sites is indicated within the policy as 20 dwellings or less. This would be the case for this proposal. It wasn't the case for the previous proposal, which was more than 20 dwellings, and that is why that was refused. Even small-scale development not within or adjacent to the settlement boundary, now this one actually is adjacent to the settlement boundary, but even those not within or adjacent to the settlement boundary is also supported, as long as it fulfills the sustainability criteria also within the neighbourhood plan. So on the basis of the current neighbourhood plan, the proposal is not in conflict with the current neighbourhood plan policy in terms of the principle of housing development, and we apply significant weight to this. However, Mendlesham is revising its neighbourhood plan. The revision is not yet at examination stage, and officers within your papers have applied little or essentially limited weight to this document. It is appreciated that the judgment of weight may not be agreed by everybody. Members may, and have the opportunity and ability to do so, may wish to apply more weight, as it's their discretion to make that judgment. This is their judgment, and it's something that would be judged, I suspect, in the debate and consideration of the proposal before them. I would not, however, ever recommend setting the revised neighbourhood plan aside as no weight. It is a material consideration. Officers have applied the application of limited weight, as this would be in line with the relevant stage of neighbourhood plan as a new neighbourhood plan document. This revision is essentially that, a new neighbourhood plan to replace the current one. However, it may be considered to have more weight, significant weight, because of the current neighbourhood plan being in place and is seen as just an amendment. Again, this is judgment. As officers, we do not feel we have sufficient evidence to test this, so our logical position would be compare it to the current established neighbourhood plan stages as set out in the various legislation. However, let's consider both positions. A revised neighbourhood plan with limited weight, or one that has significant weight. Given the debate, well, given the questions so far, I might go as far to encourage members to consider the revised neighbourhood plan as significant. What's important is what this means for this development. Even if the neighbourhood plan, revised neighbourhood plan, was given significant weight in this instance, I would put to you that it would not change the recommendation of officers before you, and I will explain why. The revised, now if you could on the slides change it to the revision, if you have that available please, thank you. The revised neighbourhood plan contains allocations that did not feature before and some changes to policy MP1. So let's look at the revision before us. This time the MP1 provides a minimum total of 161 dwellings instead of 75 new homes. It is still a minimum. This is not a cap. There is nothing in the policy to prevent housing in excess of the 161 dwellings. As before, it provides that any significant figure increase, again, significant is not defined, to housing figures would need to demonstrate that existing local services will be able to cope or appropriate measures will be provided. And on the basis of the proposal before us, your officers consider that there is no objection in this regard, and conditions have been recommended, still remains in place. The policy also says the same as it did before in terms of the location of development outside the settlement boundary, with reference of small sites within the policy, again, as 20 dwellings, regardless of allegation. This allowance remains the same. Nothing has changed in the new policy except for the minimum number of dwellings. And so this revised neighbourhood plan is not, in our opinion, in any conflict with the principle of housing of the proposal for us today, if it's given limited weight or significant weight. Lastly, there's a couple of little things I do want to mention. Regarding the neighbourhood plan, there may be a consideration that the wording, despite my explanation, does mean that there is a cap on development to 161, given the allocations put forward. If members consider this to be the case, I would immediately advise members that the revised neighbourhood plan should be given limited weight, because it would be in clear conflict with the NPPF. And in terms of the NPPF provides that you should not put a cap on development. It would be regarded as an out-of-date document immediately, and I appreciate the word out-of-date is a bit odd in this instance and unhelpful, but it effectively means it would be given less weight. Members will be aware that the Mid-Suffolk local plan and associated documents are to this day not given full weight because of their current conflicts with the NPPF. And this is why the Mid-Suffolk District Council cannot engage its own settlement boundary policy to the full extent at this time. And it's hoped that the new joint local plan will eventually resolve that point. As for the new joint local plan, members should consider the current published edition as having limited weight, and it is appreciated that this is an evolving document, but until it is close to its own examination stage, it should continue to have limited weight. Now, I appreciate I've gone on for a bit, but there are a number of views and interpretations involved, and I've considered it to be necessary to say this for the record. Officers have considered the current and revised neighbourhood plan and all associated documents. We have provided our members with consideration of weight, but members may take their own judgment to apply more or less. But this is the application of weight to the policy is not considered to alter the wording of the policy, and the development is not considered to be in conflict regardless of weight. And on that point, I will leave it, and I hope that serves. Thank you.
Thank you indeed for that. That was very helpful. So we now are open for debate, and while we are debating this item, can we look, we will obviously include all that we've heard thus far, but if we can look at the application as a whole as to what exactly is before us. So I'll open it up for debate, and I will go round in reverse order again, so that we have different outlooks to start with. And may I ask Councillor Warboys, please? Thank you. And what I would do, if I may, is can I suggest that once we've all had a say, if there is anybody that wants to put a proposal forward, please use the hands up signal to just indicate that you want to put a proposal forward, and we can do it in that basis. OK, so Councillor Warboys, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I do appreciate that a great deal of thought has been put into the proposal before us in terms of landscaping, the energy efficiency of the houses. However, this is a very sensitive site, I think, on the approach to the village. And we have had comments from Mendlesham, from the parish council, regarding how this site does affect access to the village and the suspected and the expected increases in traffic. I am there's two concerns I've got. That it really, it's about deliverability of this footpath. I have had a quick look through the website. We've got two assertions here. One is from the developer that this is deliverable, and that Suffolk County Council have actually got a definitive proposal. However, this is in conflict with what the parish council says. And as I haven't got access to a drawing, I can't really comment on whether the parish council is right in this. So my feeling is that I go with what the parish council says, in the sense that though this development is close as the crow flies, it's not necessarily that easy to access, and it's not as sustainable. There is in both the adopted local plan and the revised local plan questions that any proposed development should satisfy sustainable criteria. I think the parish council is of the opinion that this doesn't. I think there is conflict with the emerging local plan, and a community has put forward very significant proposals for development. It's not against development, but it does want to control that development, have the development where it is best for the village, where it does actually support that village as a sustainable community. So my feeling is to give more weight to this revised neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Warboys. May we hear from Councillor Norris?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I think Councillor Warboys has put into words a lot of my feelings on this application. I've heard from the parish council about their consideration of a site adjacent to Glebe Way as being more preferable. I'm also a little bit unconvinced regarding the footpath link. We've heard from the ward member, which still necessary to cross the road, etc. And perhaps the emerging revision of the neighbourhood plan should have been presented to us within the papers actually originally, and help us to understand it. So I do have some concerns on this application which really have not been fully met. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mellon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. When I was looking at the documents yesterday and reading through this, yeah, I think there's a lot to commend this application. The sustainability measures that the applicant had proposed are to be welcomed. The reduction in number of the houses from 49 of the previous application to 20, and the provision of green space is to be welcomed. And the retention and sort of better connections into the footpath network seem to be good as well. But it's when you start digging into it that there seems to be one or two problems. And I do share the concerns expressed by the two previous councillors about the footpath link. From what I can see, there's a footpath link to be provided to the frontage of Mayfield Way. And after that, you've got to sort of negotiate a crossing to a verge and that sort of thing. Now, the existing users of Mayfield Way have the same problem. So that's no sort of particular detriment. But I guess what overall we're saying is there's a provision of an upgraded footpath, but it's not exactly what we would want. It's not the connectivity that I believe the county council has requested. And then the other point to come to is Mendlesham's engagement with the local plan or the neighbourhood plan process. I mean, it seems to me that Mendlesham have done everything they possibly can to, they've spent time and money, and really as a community, they're a kind of an exemplar of what all communities should be doing in terms of trying to plan their development and engage with the planning process. And having sort of acknowledged that, and then having heard John Pateman-G's explanation, I do feel fairly uncomfortable about the possibility of sort of going against the work that the neighbourhood plan group have done, particularly where they haven't shied away from allocating sites. So that's a little bit of a problem for me. And that's where I am at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mellon. Alex, do you think you could put up some more minutiae detail of a footpath that we might have?
Yes, I'll certainly try, Chair.
I don't think it was particularly in your presentation, was it? Or do we have anything better?
That's as part of the proposal in terms of.
That's as far as we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I speak, if I may come in? The biggest problem with this plan is it doesn't actually show where Duxton Road is, which is just off the plan. So do we have anything that just goes a bit further to show where the start of Duxton Road is in association with this development? Yeah. Will it be permissible to stick another plan on if I was to share one? In terms of, I can take a Google aerial view, and I think it would be helpful to members to look at the distances involved.
Well, we're not trying to hide anything here, and the ward member has explained the difficulties of it, and the speakers so far have been trying to tussle with it. You can hear they are. If that is a useful plan, then I don't see that there's any objection to it going forward to look at it. But clearly it's not been part of the presentation thus far.
No, I appreciate that, and I apologise for that. If I may, if take your leave and just share the current Google aerial view, if I can just show members that. I'll just point out something. Are you okay if I carry on with that?
Yes, and you know, it might help everybody who's speaking on this and who's already spoken, and I apologise to the others who are waiting.
I just wondered if it would be useful to show this. I take it it's all on everybody's screen. The application site ultimately is here, which is the field. This is Mayfield Way. What we're talking about is the linkage across here. Mayfield Way already has a footpath at this point and coming across, and we're talking about that's the short gap in order to get to Duxton Road. I just think without seeing where the road is, it's very difficult to have the debate in its full. So that is the route we are essentially talking about in respect of the improvement works and so on.
Well, if you just leave that up there and let members sort of ponder it as they go through, because I'm sure we'll come back to other members again for further discussion. So I think that would be useful to leave that there for the moment.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'd just like to say it's really refreshing actually to see that only 13.6 dwellings are being planned per hectare. And as we know in policy CS9, it allows up to 30. So that's a really good thing, especially in a rural village like this. That fits in really nicely. Also, the location of this development, if I was looking from space, it seems the ideal point. It abuts the current sort of residential area and fits in there quite nicely. The use of solar panels, ground source heating, electrical charging points, also very welcomed as our environmental challenge goes forward. So that's all good stuff so far. It's also refreshing to see, as evidenced by the officer's presentation and some of the debate and discussion and questions that we've had so far, that most of the previous reasons, in fact, I'd say all of the previous reasons for refusal have been addressed. Especially significantly is the reduction from 49 to 20 dwellings, which is really welcome. That reduction in dwelling numbers fits in with the adopted neighbourhood plan and also the emerging neighbourhood plan. So that's good because it fits in with a policy that's been written by the residents / the parish council. Excellent. When I've read through the summary of objections, all the points raised, I believe, been satisfied by the developer or other agencies, including flood. So we'll go to the flood because that's come up a few times. Just a bit of a correction, really. It was commented before that flood zone 1 was a 1 in 100 year event. I believe it's a 1 in 1,000.
1,000.
Yeah. So we'll just underline that bit, and also that development, as long as it's under a hectare, actually is allowed. And if you look at all the maps and all the charts, we are outside of any risk of flood. We're flood zone 1, so the chance is minimal. It's the lowest we can get apart from 0. So I think the flooding issue. It's taken us down a route when actually, if you look through all the papers and you look at the maps and you understand the flood zone categories, I believe it's little to no risk. There's always a risk, but it's little to no in this case. So therefore, it's not a massive factor for this particular development. You could say that actually this development is in line with the wishes of the residents if you believe that the adopted neighbourhood plan is the wishes of the residents and also the parish council, and therefore it is. You know, they've said that, yeah, we don't mind having a development that abuts our settlement boundary as long as it's 20 dwellings and less. Well, this fits in with that and satisfies all the other requirements. Well, I think it does on sustainability, actually. And if we go down to the footpath issue, the fact that on page, wherever the map is, the map does show that actually the footpath between Mayfield Way and the development is going to be developed. And as John Payton G said, there is a small footpath there, and you do have to cross the road. Well, you can't have a continuous footpath if there's a road in the way, so a little bit of common sense comes into this as well. At some point, we will have to cross the road, and we'll try and minimise that, I'm sure, as much as possible. But unfortunately, there is a house between Mayfield Way and Dunstan Road on the north side of Chapel Road that might prevent some of that development. So no matter what we want, there is a very good chance that we can't have everything we want. And I think the compromise is that it'll go as far as possible and you will have to cross the road. That's modern life in a village, town, or any other development. When it comes down to it, having read through all of this and listened to all the arguments and the questions and some of the debate, I believe there are no planning reasons, legal reasons, why we should not approve this application. It complies completely, I believe, with the adopted Mendlesham neighbourhood plan that has significant weight, and it also complies with the emerging revised version of the neighbourhood plan that, well, we'll say it's got limited weight, but even if it had all the weight in the world, it complies with it. So it complies with both elements of the neighbourhood plan in respect to the amount of development that can go on in that location, in my opinion. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I just can't see a reason not to approve this. I'm minded to go for approval, to be honest with you. Thank you.
We're not looking for that at the moment, but I hear your points of view. Thank you, Councillor.
Just minded.
Yeah. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, on the neighbourhood plan issues, and I'm grateful to Mr. Pateman G for his comments and advice in relation to that, which just goes to show that this is not a simple matter. And I'm concerned that the report at page 20, and I've seen it in other planning reports as well, appears to equate a particular stage of the neighbourhood planning process with mechanically with a level of significance. So we've got in the report that it says that the revised neighbourhood plan currently at stage 1 and accordingly has at the current time little weight. Well, I think, as Mr. Pateman G has demonstrated, it's not as simple as that, and so I'd like to ask that in other planning and future planning reports that we deal with the complexity of the significance of neighbourhood plans. I think it was Councillor Mellon who talked about the Mendlesham's plan as an exemplar, and I don't disagree with him. Certainly, in the early stages of the preparation of the Iron neighbourhood plan, we found there was much to learn from the way that Mendlesham had gone about it, certainly as one of the early developers of a neighbourhood plan, and particularly in terms of community engagement and so on. But one of the things that we learned from the process is the importance of having an allocations policy, and that without an allocations policy, you need that allocations policy to give effect to the neighbourhood plan. And I recognise that that's where the revised plan is at, and it was interesting to hear that they have a site for 20 houses within the plan, but we can only look at the application that's before us, and there I come to the remarks that a number of councillors have made, which is that actually there is a great deal of merit within this application, and actually all the reasons for refusal of the early application have been addressed, and therefore I see on that basis no planning reasons really for not supporting the application before us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Councillor Caston, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this flooding situation. I do have concerns at the risk of a sod system a few metres away from a floodplain, any sort of floodplain. It's 1 in 1,000 years. It's 1 in 1,000 years doesn't mean it's going to be 1,000 years until that level of flooding. It means next winter it could flood to 1,000-year levels. but the soil type is liable to be seasonally wet. I'm not a drainage engineer, but I have sat on the county's flood risk scrutiny committee and the drainage board for several years now. But I can only work with the information that's in front of me, and that says that it's acceptable. So I can't go against this. I am concerned if there's a double check mechanism that we could activate to make sure that drainage model is correct. I'd like to activate that, but I can't object to this application just on that basis. I like the mix of houses here. There's useful houses for residents, for young people that have grown up in Mendlesham. There's houses that they could actually afford to buy. The land, I don't think it's a great loss of agricultural land, because from the pictures I look at that oilseed rape crop, and I can see that isn't the most productive land in Suffolk. The footpath is regrettable that it doesn't go straight across, but it does have a nice open straight bit of road. It's not on a bend. I think if that was on a tight bend, it'd be a serious concern to me, but it's not a massive concern at the moment. So I think on that basis, I wouldn't object to this application, but I do understand the neighbourhood plan issues and the conflicts, and I've thought quite a lot about the weight that they carry. But at the moment, I'm minded for approval. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Caston. And that now comes to me. I've been listening very carefully to everyone, and I think everyone is very, very appreciative of all the hard work that's gone into a neighbourhood plan. As I said earlier, it's not normal to get copies of the neighbourhood plan placed before us, emerging or otherwise. And somebody mentioned earlier that the JLP currently isn't given full weight because it's not been approved. And I'm afraid that's where it sits with the current Mendlesham plan, that we can't give as much full weight as maybe we would like to. There's been copious amounts of work gone in there. Commenting about Councillor Caston's, the last refusal on SUDS, there was no refusal on SUDS or flooding, but I'm appreciative of his knowledge, not only as being on that committee, but also as a farmer, and we all know what clay is like and things like that. So I welcomed his probing inquiries into that aspect of it. I'm just hearing everybody talking about the footpath. And is there any mileage that we can put that there's a tacit agreement that it doesn't go ahead should members be minded to approve it until that footpath is fully explored and satisfactory? I just put that one as we go round for a second debate. So I find it very difficult to find a planning reason for refusal. Yes, you could say, oh, the neighbourhood plan, but it isn't fully in place. Very difficult situation, and the passion of the ward member and all the evidence that he's supplied to us, I'm very grateful for, because we do get these cases coming up as we go forward. So at the moment, I can't find anything to refuse it on. So that's where I'm at the moment. So I wonder if we would like to go round again, or if anyone has a proposal that they want to put to me.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, this is, sorry.
Oh, wait a minute, the legal person before Councillor Humphreys.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Humphreys. Just, sorry, I'll put myself on camera just for a moment, I think. That will,
thank you.
And Madam, just to say, Madam Chairman, I have had a message just gone only to me quite properly from Councillor, to me as legal advisor from Councillor Stringer. We do now, we obviously, Councillor Stringer's position as ward member here is he's normally a member of the committee, but we follow our Mid-Suffolk rule that if we were in the council chamber, he'd be sitting apart. He has the right to speak as he would have if he were not a member of the committee, a regular member of the committee, but he then doesn't participate in the debate. However, I'm just mindful, Councillor Stringer has said to me he has an unanswered question. I think I'm mindful of the fact that we had what I think I found, and I know members have said they found, a very useful and detailed piece of advice on the weight of policies, but including the neighbourhood plan policies. That was something, the officers' comments was something that on a different chain of events might have come earlier, but because they came late, I'm very much mindful we must follow our usual rules and not allow Councillor Stringer to participate in the debate. But I do feel I should advise you that we should be depart a little, and just, if we may, go to Councillor Stringer and just see how can we assist him further on answering questions without him participating in the debate. So if we may, Madam Chairman, that's my advice.
Yes, thank you for that. And if Councillor Humphreys can just wait for one moment, and because we are in unusual situations, where are you, Councillor Stringer? Do please, do please state what you wish to state.
I recognise the delicacy of the situation. In normal circumstances, this wouldn't be happening, but we're not in normal circumstances. Given what I've just heard, there's an unanswered question. My third question from earlier was always pivotal. It has not been answered, and in fact has actually got more muddied. We've had members now and officers quoting from the front page of the emerging neighbourhood plan without showing you its allocations maps, which is not helpful. But my initial question was, have you taken into account the impact of approving this application on the published amendment to the neighbourhood plan? That is what all of those appeal inspections had ruled upon. It's not what's policy or what isn't policy. It's the impact of your actions. That is what I asked the question of, and that is what I have had not the answer to. I've had the answer from all the appeal rulings. I haven't had I need to make sure that the decision makers, you good councillors, have recognised the impact you will have on that emerging neighbourhood plan on your decision. And if you haven't seen all of it, that is somewhat difficult. The other small point is the officers keep talking about a footpath from Mayfield Way. That is not the footpath that everybody uses. There is 2 footpaths that link Mayfield Way, and not one person has shown you where that is, which is deeply regretful. But if you want to go with what you got, that's fine. But it's that unanswered question, which is why you're grappling. Councillor Humphreys said that he was happy that the new emerging neighbourhood plan was consistent because he'd read the front page. He hadn't read all of the documentation, which actually said the front page is the policy, but it has to be linked to those proposals maps to make this deliverable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we just go back to the footpath issue? Can somebody...
if I may,
yes, John.
On that. So, Councillor Stringer, that question, at the point that question should have been asked, was a question to officers, if I am correct?
Yeah, correct, yes, and I did ask at that time.
We, as officers, you would have seen the officer report, and I am completely satisfied that the officer has read the documentation in full and taken that into account. I appreciate that this decision would have an impact on the rest of the revised neighbourhood plan. But I'm also equally considerate of the actual policy wording of the revised neighbourhood plan. And regardless of allocation, that policy and the way it is worded allows for development outside the settlement boundary, and it indicates 20 dwellings. And I also have a bearing on this that comes from the previous refusal, because of how the previous refusal, which is also a material consideration. Now, admittedly, the previous refusal was in respect of the current neighbourhood plan, But I'm happy that looking at all of the evidence in the round of my explanation to members, but I agree it is very complicated, and it is all a matter of judgment of weight. But I can't do anything more than I've done. Ultimately, it is now for members to consider the weight that they apply. But I do not believe, in the way we have interpreted the policy, that there is a prevention of housing before us, and that up to 20 is an indication within that policy outside the boundary that can be allowed for. Thank you.
So,
thank you. Right. So I think we've come to the next applicant or person would be Councillor Humphreys. You wish to speak. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you. Yeah, just going back to Councillor Stringer's point, I've read obviously the old policy that we've seen regarding the, as Mr. Pateman-G said, about building and being allowed to develop 20 dwellings or less on sites abutting the settlement. All I was saying was that I have also read, because it's been shown on this presentation, the emerging plan, and that I can't see any difference in that strict policy element that we've seen. And I can only base my opinion and my comments on what I see and what I read in this proposal, and that's all I've done. Are we up for proposals now? That's why I raised my hand. Okay.
If you wish, yeah.
So, having listened to everybody, and hats off to Mendlesham, and you're right about the neighbourhood plan. A lot of work's been going on within it before and now, and it's refreshing to see actually that a local parish council not only makes a development plan and publishes it, but they revisit it, they amend it, and they update it, and that's quite rare, and you should be congratulated for it. But having said that, having read that policy statement on page 1, there is no change that affects this actual development, and for that, I can't find any legal or planning reason why we can't agree to approve this recommendation, and therefore I am moving a recommendation for approval.
Thank you for that, Councillor Humphreys. Do I have a seconder to that proposal, please?
Madam Chair, James Casson would like to second that. I think this is a really difficult application. It's very complicated. I think the benefits outweigh the issues with this, so I'd like to second that proposal.
Thank you for that. I will go round again to let other people talk, if I may, please. So, Councillor Warboys, do you wish to say anything else?
Yes. I don't think I'm prepared to accept to support this proposal at this stage. I feel we've had a great deal of discussion, and if we actually supported the proposal, we would actually be basing it on using our opinions of what is good or of benefit for Mendlesham. I think Mendlesham Parish Council has gone to a great deal of effort to propose the neighbourhood plan and a revised neighbourhood plan, looking at the community as a whole, and we are restricted to look at what's within the red lines, but on the other hand, the weight that we need to attach to the neighbourhood plan and the revised neighbourhood plan is based on looking at the community whole, and they have got very objective arguments. They have taken professional advice, they have consulted with the communities, they are representing their communities, and they have a definitive idea of how they want the community to develop. And I think we should support that process. The concept of the impact of our decision on those processes and other processes within Mid Suffolk is very, very important, and I think we do need to bear that in mind, that we don't give too much weight to our opinions on what is good for Mendlesham, but we should really look at Mendlesham Parish Council's objective arguments here about what is good for their community.
Thank you for that, Councillor Warboys. Councillor Norris, would you like to say anything again, please?
Yes, thank you. I tend to follow Councillor Warby's arguments regarding the amount of work and time, obviously, and some considerable financial cost, I'm sure, has been incurred in producing a neighbourhood plan by the residents and the parish council, and also now working on this revision that's coming forward on the neighbourhood plan. I think we should respect their knowledge of their own area. They have indicated a preference actually for an alternative site. I also still have some issues with connectivity. I don't want to keep labouring the point on this footpath, but to me the simple solution would be to have a crossing point somewhere on Chapel Road actually, but perhaps that's a different matter. So I'm still not fully able to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Norris. Councillor Warboys, can you take your video off for the minute, please, if you would? Councillor Mellon, if you would, please. Further comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there's three just very brief comments I want to make. One is I've had a look on Google Street View of the footpath issue and the crossing across to Duxton Road, and I think, to be honest, my concerns there are largely allayed. I think there is the potential for a connection there, which I think the parish council could achieve at some point in the future if they put their minds to it. The second thing is the flooding. I think the flood advisor to the applicant said that this is in floodplain 1, and it looks to me it's on the edge of floodplain 2. So that does raise it up a little bit higher in my concerns than perhaps it was before. We are seeing these 1 in 1,000 year events turning up with more sort of frequent regularity across the world with climate change. So that is a concern. But my main concern is this issue of the neighbourhood plan and where we stand with that. And I'm very grateful to John Peyton G for his very careful explanation of the legalities there. But overall, I just feel uncomfortable with going against the work that neighbourhood team in Mendlesham have done. It does really lead me to feel that I will vote against the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Humphreys, do you want to say anything else at all?
Sorry, Madam Chair, having button problems pressing the microphone. No, I've listened to it. I think Councillor Warboys, your points are absolutely valid, and nobody's taken it away from the local parish council. As I said in my proposal, they should be congratulated really for the work they do on behalf of the residents and the fact they do re-attack the neighbourhood plan and improve it for the future and evolve it, and that's fantastic. However, we can only go on what's in front of us, and the emerging local plan on that policy statement, as I said before, is still in line with what's written in the current adopted neighbourhood plan. It's 20 or less dwellings. That's accepted as acceptable by the parish, and all the reasons for the refusal, they've been addressed. I just don't understand why we couldn't approve this legally. There's no planning reason why we can't approve it.
Thank you. Councillor Gould, any further comments?
No further comment from me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Caston, any further comments?
No further comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Then I have a proposer and a seconder, so I go to the Chief Planning, Planning Officer and Area Planning Manager to read out the proposal that we have before us before we go to the vote, please.
I am not aware of any additions to the recommendation before you in terms of the papers. So rather than just sort of list all the conditions that are in there, I can only perhaps just say that the recommendation is one of approval as per your papers. and I'm about to say which page that is, and I've lost track of
Page
my...
38.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't have a paper copy. I'm trying to get used to being electronic still on that basis. So in respect of that, but like I said, there is no additional conditions that were being discussed. There was a part mention about that the layout to be in general accord with the indicative plan, but that hasn't, to my knowledge, been added to the recommendation. So the recommendation is just as it is presented. Thank you.
Is the proposer and seconder happy with the proposals?
Madam Chairman, I did mention earlier whether there was a way to double check the modelling on that flood risk before approval. I'd just like to ask the officer if that's possible.
If I may, obviously we have the County Council as the flood authority, who are essentially the second check. So we, at this stage, they see no concern to put forward to us. They would be involved later as well.
Can I interrupt, John? It does say that the Chief Planning Officer, it says those required by the local lead flood authority as recommended. So it is in there.
It's in there. So we've already put that forward in place. And I lastly, just to point out that what we have before us is an indicative plan, and there's a lot of space around the attenuation basin and a lot of space around the houses. So there's a lot of flexibility there, if absolutely necessary, to move that location slightly as required when it comes to reserve matter stage, and that would be dealt with accordingly. Thank you.
Right.
Hopefully not to the top of the hill.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
What?
Well, I just the attenuation basin's got to be at the bottom of the hill, surely. I don't think that we've got a huge degree of
James, look,
flexibility.
we're either debating. I really don't think that we're in debate. You're either satisfied with it, if not, vote against it.
Just to clarify, my mistake. We needed to move it slightly away from the boundary by a metre or two. That's within the remit of that indicative plan. I suggest.
Sorry, my apologies. I see where you're coming from. Both. Yeah. Okay. So can I move to Robert, please, to take the appropriate vote? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if you could please respond with for, against or abstain. So Councillor James Carston.
For.
Councillor Peter Gould.
For.
Councillor Kathy Guthrie.
For.
Councillor Barry Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mellon.
Against.
Councillor Mike Norris.
Against.
And Councillor Roland Warboys.
Against.
Thank you, Chair. That is carried.
And yes, Chairman, this is the legal advisor agreeing. I agree with Mr. Carmichael. It is indeed carried. I counted with him.
That's 4-3, isn't it?
4-3.
Correct.
Right. Can we have a comfort break for 15 minutes, please, and then be back to do the second application, if we would. I would suggest everybody. Well, I'm certainly going to leave my machine available for use. And thank you to all the people that have joined in on the meeting. If you could now leave the meeting, who won't be required for the next part of the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll now just take another roll call to confirm all members are here for the second item of the day.
Thank you.
Oh, I haven't got my camera on, apologies. It's rude of me. So, Councillor Rode, we'll go in the normal order, sorry. Councillor, oh no, that's the wrong order there. I'll get to the right one in a minute. Apologies, Chair. So, Councillor James Carston.
Present.
Councillor Peter Gould.
Present.
Councillor Guthrie.
Present.
Councillor Humphreys.
Present.
Councillor Mellon.
Present.
Councillor Norris.
Present.
Councillor Stringer.
Present.
Councillor Warboys.
Present.
And could I just please confirm that our two public speakers are here of Mr. Stephen Hubner.
Present.
Mr. Stephen Hubner from the Parish Council.
Yes. Good morning. Present. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And then also Mr. Sebastian Blemmings.
Yes, present.
Thank you, Chair. We are all here.
Right. And I hope we've got Sarah Scott to introduce the case. So, if we move on now to the application DC 20-00263, land at rear of Cedar Cottage, the street, Occold, Suffolk. So, Sarah Scott, if you'd like to introduce the application, please. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, Sarah Scott is not available today for unforeseen circumstances, so you will be presented this by myself.
Okay. And in that case, John Pateman G will present the case then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So this is application DC 20-263, land to the rear of Cedar Cottage. It's a full application for the erection of one two-storey dwelling with attached garage, and the location of the village of Occold is between Debenham and Eye, essentially. It has a primary school, village hall and other services. Closer in, the site is within the west side of the village. Just in this point here, we'll look at that closely in a minute. And this is the main village. The closer in, we can see that this is the site we're talking about. I'll come up with a red line in a moment. This is the B1077 running along one side, and we have Church Street running along the other. Cedar Cottage is the existing dwelling, not part of the site, to the north. And we also see on this, unfortunately, is the most up-to-date aerial photograph we can get hold of at the moment. We can see that there is construction of dwellings adjacent, and this is a previous approval. There are 8 dwellings, and they are being built. Now, they are in a more advanced state of construction, which on-site photos taken at the end of last week will show in a moment. So just to reiterate, the red line plan for this site is as shown, and we have a blue line plan as well with regard to the adjacent site that is in the middle of construction. Cedar Cottage is the property just here. The access to the red line plan is via the existing or new access that now that has been built as part of this development. Constraints map, just to show that there are no immediate planning considerations or constraints in terms of the site itself. We have the settlement boundary, which is this line as shown here, the brown line. And this development is outside of that settlement boundary. So here we have the layout plan. The proposal of the proposed dwelling is set adjacent to the last plot almost built next door. So this is the new proposed dwelling, single dwelling, against the current ones being built. And you'll see that is the garage, as part attached garage as part of the proposal, and it's in line with essentially the garage of Cedar's Cottage, which is set along the road frontage of Church Street. Can I just clarify, can everybody see my cursor okay? It looks very small to me as I'm pointing things out. Is that okay? I take it that it is.
No problem. That's fine.
Yes, I can
Thank
see
you.
it.
Sorry,
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
was just conscious that it seemed very small for some reason on my screen. So the design is barn themed, contemporary barn themed. It's a 2-story dwelling. It's 8.7 meters high with eaves 5 meters. The style is in line with the contemporary approach of the new adjacent development being built at the moment. And the garage part, which is this element here, this element here, is the closer to the north and closer to Cedar Cottage. It blocks, so we have a bedroom window on the side. Of course, the garage itself blocks out any view from that window over towards Cedar Cottage. For the most part, you might just see the end of Cedar Cottage garage from there, but you wouldn't see the majority of the garden or the house. And we have first floor at the rear. We have first floor roof lights. These obviously will overlook the new rear garden. So if I just go back, here are the roof lights overlooking the rear garden. There will be no direct overlooking, but I'm not going to say there wouldn't be any overlooking, as if you stand very close to the roof light and purposely look at an angle, you possibly can look at 45-degree angles. So those are those roof light windows, but in all other respects, the building is designed to block out any intrusive overlooking view. Just for the sake of clarity, this is the floor plan. Again, this is the garage. This is the various layouts of the bedrooms and so forth. So you have a bedroom window at first floor at the side, and we have the roof lights that go down. The first set just go down to the kitchen, and then you have the second set that go into the bedroom, bathroom, and ensuite. This is Cedar Cottage, taken from the site. The first thing you will notice is that the roof appears to come out of the ground. That is because Cedar Cottage is a traditional cottage, a non-designated historic asset that fronts the main road and is set lower than the land that forms part of this application site. It's a good couple of meters, and I think probably looking at the eaves height and the car is a good indication of where the land sits in association. So I'm just going to run through these photographs just to say these have been taken fairly recently from site itself, and you will see that the adjacent development is in full swing of nearing completion in terms of the linear line of houses that have been created there. And I'll go back to show you where that is in correspondence with this site in a moment. So these are the various outlooks from the site. And stepping back again, Cedar Cottage, existing development on the other side of the road, and the site itself. And this is the access to the new site via the existing being built, constructed development adjacent. Just to give you a general overview, again, we're back to the last plot before the new proposal. And just coming back along the road further into the village to look back, we have the junction with Church Street, Road Street, with the B1077. And you see Cedar's Cottage is hidden away within the vegetation there, and we have the new development that is being built along the street. And that's the new access that's been built for the new development, which would lead into the proposed single dwelling. So we have Cedar's Cottage just here, and the site just through here. And again, from the other angle, the cottage, its garage, and the site would be behind that. And a long distance view as well. So that's the end plot as currently built, and that's the cottage, and the site is essentially sitting in the middle there. Now I've just put this photo on with the layout on it at the same time, just to give an indication of where things are. So the house on the other side of the road is that property there, and that's the indication of that property there. And that property, it's in line with that property that the new proposal would be. So we then have, just for reference, the adjacent development that's there now, which is that one just there, and the new development would be in front of that. And of course, we know that that's Cedar Cottage. In terms of sustainable development, this is outside the settlement boundary, but would be very much part of the current village and the adjacent recently approved scheme for 8 dwellings. This would form a bookend to that development in this location. We have no access issues given that approval. Had the development been part of the adjacent 8, it would not have resulted in any additional policy trigger for infrastructure requirements, and the proposal does not seek to circumvent any obligations on that in that regard. The dwelling will be subject to further SIL contribution. Looking at the site, the design and layout of the dwelling has been considered to avoid any significant overlooking and amenity issues by the way of the types of windows and their positions within the dwelling design. Officers don't think this would be sufficient as an issue on its own to warrant refusal in the balance. Levels are significantly different between Cedar Cottage and the proposed site, but given the layout, orientation, along with the distance and the opportunity to landscape, there is a judgment on overbearing and dominance to consider, and on balance it is considered that this is acceptable in this case. So the officer recommendation is one of approval as per your papers. Thank you.
Thank you for that, John. In our briefing, we had some photographs that came from the actual corner looking towards the cottage. I wonder if you could route that out for us, please, and pop that up at some stage. And I do have a question here. Sorry to jump in against everyone else. On the slide you've got on at the moment, where the house is, there's potentially 3 trees they're showing from the house, but there's a green line going to the back of you can see a green line just going to the back of the cottage and along. What is the gap between that green line and the edge of the ownership of Cedar Cottage, and what is that likely to be, please?
Can you give me a moment to measure that? I'm going to have to stop sharing, come out, and then come back in again. Thank you.
Come back with that at a later date. But if you can find that that other photograph that we saw from the corner, I think that would help members as well. Thank you.
Okay.
So, are you able, John, to take questions as we continue?
Yes, I will definitely try. Of course, this is the peril of presenting and doing this at the same time, but bear with me.
Yeah, we can come up with that as we go through it. So, Councillor Warboys, do you have questions for the presentation, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I think an excellent range of photographs, I thought, especially as they showed the significant height difference between the land at the back of the cottage and the road level. It's between 2 and 3 meters, I think. So my question is, my question is, I get the overall height of the proposed building as somewhere about 11 meters, taking into account the difference in ground levels. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't disagree with that. As a rough ballpark, yes.
Yeah.
So the current building proposed is 8.7 meters. So if you add a couple of meters to that, 9, 10, so 10.7 to 11 meters.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stringer? Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Warboys. Councillor Stringer?
Yeah, we're just doing questions.
Yeah, just questions, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Can you tell me whether this part of this site is inside or outside the draft joint local plan?
I can't. I will check and come back to you.
Any other questions, Councillor Stringer?
No, thanks. That's it.
Councillor Norris?
No questions as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mellon?
No questions, but I am looking at the emerging local plan map, and it does not appear to be inside the boundary there.
Well, we'll come to the debate, and that will be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct. I've just found it at the same time. You got there first. It is now. This particular part is outside of that line. You're quite correct. Although the adjacent 8 are within the proposed joint local plan boundary.
Where are we? Councillor Humphreys?
No questions, thank you.
And we'll come to Peter Gould later because he's the ward member. Councillor Caston?
No questions, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Well, actually, I did this the last time and asked Councillor Stringer. So, Councillor Gould, do you have any questions for the officer?
No, I don't. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Right. So, any nearer to getting the other photographs, John? Or
yeah, one more moment. I'm just quickly pulling them up now. Bear with me, please. I'll be there in a minute. 2, 6, 3. Now, I'm not sure it will share this though, so I might have to copy it.
it was just the two that you showed us that were quite helpful. That was all.
Yes.
And as Councillor Mellon said, there were very good photographs that you've supplied now, but it was just one angle that was seemingly missing.
I believe that was slide 31, Madam Chairman.
No, it isn't a slide, actually. No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Bear with me. I've just got to quickly go through the neighbour letters just to find it. I know which one you're talking about.
Well, if you carry on finding it, and then we'll come to the public speaker then, if we may, please. We have the Parish Council representative, Stephen Hubner. If you have 3 minutes, would you like to tell us about the application site and the Parish Council's views, if you would, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's very kind. Yes, the Parish Council objects to the proposal. There are a number of fundamental reasons. One has been highlighted to you already, that the location falls outside the proposed joint local plan. I think the reason for that is fairly simple. It's because permission was granted for what is now 8 dwellings within the confines of what is shown by the blue line on the plans you've seen, not extending into this particular area, the rear of Cedar Cottage. So this would be taking the development one step further outside the settlement area. The second issue we have is to do with the inappropriate massing of the proposed development. Whilst we can accept the principle of bookending the existing 8 dwellings, this property, if built, would be at the different alignment to those which exist at present, and it would be a dominating feature in the approach from Eye along the B1077. One of the photos you saw showed that general layout of the present development from the Eye direction. It wasn't particularly clear, but if you imagine a very large barn in front of those existing dwellings, that would be the appearance we would then see. And I'm afraid whilst the officer has suggested that this property would not dominate Cedar Cottage, given the difference in land levels, it would completely obscure and overwhelm any view of that property, which is a heritage, albeit not listed, building at the entrance to the village. The property will also adversely affect the natural flow of light to the properties on the other side of the road, which are in a property called Cedar Close, excuse me. As the officer pointed out, such as the location of the proposed development and its height above the road, that you would wind up with something approximately 12 rather than 10, approximately 12 metres of roof line on the main angle through for light to travel across the road to Cedars Close. and that would have a significant and material impact on the dwelling opposite. The last issue we have is to do with the impact of the garden to the rear of Cedar Cottage. It's not clear on the plans what is proposed there, and I accept that the recommendation does include a landscaping condition. You've asked, Madam Chair, exactly what is proposed anyway and what the gap is. I'm interested to know the results. But if you imagine Cedar Cottage will be overlooked from the garden, if not from the dwelling itself, and such as the roof line, that anybody standing in the proposed garden area would look directly into the windows of Cedar Cottage. That is a pretty material intrusion on privacy. The issue is not that that cannot happen were the field still to be farmland, but of course that would only happen, farmland is farmland, it's agricultural use. It's not an amenity to a dwelling and not likely to be used for the purpose of people standing outside.
Can you now finish onto your 3 minutes, if you would, please?
That is my 3 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And just before we come to questions, John, can you just put that photograph up? And if you'll excuse us, Mr. Hubner, we'll just put the photograph up for people to look at, and then the questions might answer themselves. John, can you do that?
Is that coming through? I can only show you through the system, so I can't bring that up onto a PowerPoint. So hopefully that's clear. So
can you just describe what we're looking at here?
So this is the corner of the main street going through the village and the B1077 at the top, and this is taken from the Cedars Cottage, the back of. Obviously we've had angles looking across that way. That's the garage for the existing property, and that is the last plot being built of the 8 adjacent. So that's the landform there, and you can see that there's a couple of meters essentially, well, good 3 meters in terms of that line that oscillates around the site.
And what does that? What do those 3 meters? Who owns that? What does that tell us?
I'm going back to the site boundary, if I may. The red line, I think it's an indication of the drop in land, but the site plan is a lot closer in terms of the red line. So I'm assuming the ownership is with the site as declared by the application forms. If I
we'll come to that when we come to the applicant. But if we can go back to Mr. Hubner, I just wanted to put that up because he did comment about that view. So if we can come back to Mr. Hubner, please, if you want to put your video up, and I'll ask
thank you.
the members to ask questions. Councillor Warboys, any questions, please?
No, I think it's quite clear. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr.
Huber. Councillor Stringer? Any questions?
No more questions. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. Councillor Norris?
No, thank you.
Councillor Mellon?
Yes, Chair. If I could just ask the Parish Council Chair, what engagement did the applicant have with the Parish Council about this application?
None, I'm afraid.
Any other questions, Councillor Mellon?
Oh, thank you, Chair.
No. Right. Councillor Humphreys?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
And, well, Councillor Gould, we'll come to you in a minute. Councillor Caston?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And no, and in fact, you raised quite a few points of interest there for debate, so thank you very much indeed. So if you'd like to return to your previous state of not being on our video, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
So we don't have any speakers or objector, so we'll ask the applicant, Sebastian Blemmings, if you would like to speak, please, and you have 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually the planning agent, not the applicant.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's obviously just to clarify that point. Okay. Firstly, thanks ever so much for letting me have this opportunity to explain the proposals. Ali Hart, the applicant, is a developer who builds throughout the Mid-Suffolk area and concentrates on building good quality homes utilising excellent quality materials. Ali is not a large-scale developer with a huge land bank. He will build a project out. So once procured a site, we'll progress the site through, and it will be built out in a timely manner. The Occold site is not yet complete, or considered complete, with this sort of large parcel of land to the northern end of the site, which would obviously complete the development. There would be no incentive for Ali, the developer, to maintain this land if it is not approved. Consequently, obviously, that would leave a bit of an eyesore. But obviously, if it was approved, or a scheme was approved, then this would provide a sort of an attractive entrance to the village, with the site being landscaped appropriately. We've engaged with the local authority very early, both prior to the submission of the previous scheme and prior to the submission of this scheme. And this is the case with all applications that we undertake with the local authority. A pre-application was meeting, and the initial discussion was actually for between 2 and 3 dwellings on this site, with a mix of single and 2-storey properties. When the formal feedback was received, it advised that 2 properties would be the preferred route from a planning perspective. Following concerns raised regarding potential impact on Cedar Cottage during the application, or whilst we've been within the application phase, we made further concession and have agreed to remove one of the properties and change the design subsequently. So what started off with a potential development of 3 properties has now resulted in a proposal for just a single dwelling. It is acknowledged that the proposed development would occupy an elevated position. This is not obviously we don't sort of have any concerns with that point, but what we would sort of suggest is that this design and siting has been used to mitigate this fact through the position of windows and the positions of rooms within the dwelling, to ensure that overlooking towards Cedar Cottage is not an issue. The proposed. Can
you now finish? You're nearly up on time.
Okay, I'll sort of skittle through that. But basically, to conclude, that there is a sort of a landscape scheme around the perimeter of the site, and we would be looking to ensure that the.
Right, I think you've now finished on your time. Thank you. So you've got your landscape scheme in, and we'll take note of that. Okay. So if you could just stay there for a minute, and
yeah, no
I'll ask one or 2 people if they would like to have questions for you. So, Councillor Warboys.
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Stringer.
Couple of questions, Chair. It's about the landscaping between here and Cedar Cottage. You said that the owner had a sort of draconian policy about land that's worth to them not doing anything with it. So what's going to happen with the piece of land between the landscaping and the boundary of Cedar Cottage?
I think, Councillor, that was my question earlier when I asked the planning officer. So you've asked a very salient question to the right people, and I thank you.
Well, I can certainly answer that one. There is a slight discrepancy, and the owner of Cedar Cottage believes that he owns to the top of the hill. Having said that, the land registry information contravenes that information. The applicant has said that he would be willing to offer this land to Cedar Cottage for their benefit. So it would all become within the ownership of Cedar Cottage.
So are you telling me then your red line of your application site then finishes at your landscaping and doesn't include that little strip?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Right, okay, then I'm sorry, we can't take that into account, because what we have to take into account is what is inside the red line and the title of your
Andrew,
application.
thanks. We'll use that in debate. We've got the answer to the question,
fine.
and we
One
can take that forward.
question. Just one other question. You suggest that you'd taken the number of houses down in number from 2 to 1. Average 3-bedroom home is 100 square metres. How many square metres of living accommodation does this one dwelling have?
Bear with me 1 second. I must confess, I don't have that exact information to hand. This is. Can
I suggest that you work it out and come back to us?
I could certainly do that
during the meeting, if you would, please, and also. Picking up on Councillor Stringer's point, does the garaging above it have accommodation?
Yes, it does.
So can you calculate the square footage for us, or however you do it in metres these days?
Yeah, the area above the garage is an ensuite and a dressing room serving the bedroom.
So if you can calculate that, and I'll come back to you and ask that question. Any further questions, Councillor Stringer?
Sorry, no, Chair, I don't. No, that's it.
No,
thank you.
For raising those. Councillor Norris, any questions for the applicant?
None, thank you.
Councillor Mellon?
I'm just a little concerned as why the applicant hasn't discussed with the parish council. Was there any reason why he didn't do that?
Only in as much that the original scheme was an adoption of an adopted previous scheme, if that makes sense.
Can we discuss that later, if that's your answer to the question? Because I think we need to bottom that out, and I'm sure Councillor Mellon will bring that up in debate further. Do you agree with that way forward, Councillor Mellon?
Yes, fine. No further questions, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Humphreys?
No questions, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Caston?
No questions, Madam Chair, thank you.
Right, well, I'll come back to Mr. Blemmings to ask for the meterage, or however it's going to be the size. So we now move on to the ward member, if you would, please. Councillor Gould, would you like to tell us about this application?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I had something prepared to say, which I've been busying with a pencil since hearing Mr. Hubner's very clear account. So to avoid duplication, I'll try not to make too many of the same points again.
You are the ward member, and we like to hear everything, so please feel free.
Sure. I decided to call in this application following the discussion held at the Parish Council and the objection that the Parish Council made. I also sought advice from planning officers. It's true, the application has been amended to provide a single dwelling rather than the two proposed before. And though the impact of the revised application might be considered to be reduced, I think it has been made perfectly clear the mass of this is still a very substantial building with an impact on the neighbouring Cedar Cottage. So I decided not to withdraw the call-in request, and so that the application could benefit from the committee's consideration. Now, the reasons for my call-in are set out in full under Part 1 of the officer's report. And you'll notice that a lot of the arguments I make draw heavily on the advice of the heritage officer. You've seen from the photographs that the site itself occupies a significant position at the entrance to the village, approaching from the B1077, the Eye to Debenham road. And the prominence of the site is all the greater for it being elevated, rising to a height of 2 metres above the road level. Now, this is, I think, being graphically demonstrated by the photographs that we have seen. As such, the development would overlook and overshadow existing dwellings to the northeast and west of the site, and Mr. Hubner has made this clear. Of particular concern is the dominance that the proposal would have on the street scene, with a considerable impact on Cedar Cottage. And this dominance and its impact would conflict with the isolated setting of a heritage asset, albeit non-designated, and the character, very particular character of Cedar Cottage. So as well as the physical dominance of the proposal, the plans are incompatible with the design and character of Cedar Cottage, not least in terms of its particular character and scale. And I ask the committee to consider these points and pay particular heed to the advice of the Heritage Officer in determining this application. And while it might seem odd in a sense to be calling in an application about an individual dwelling application in this way, I ask you to bear in mind, think about those photographs and the point they make most graphically in terms of the impact of this upon Cedar Cottage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. So asking for comments, Councillor Warboys, do you have any questions? Councillor Warboys?
Yeah, it's. I think Councillor Gould has actually sort of produced quite clear arguments about the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer?
No questions for the ward member.
Councillor Norris?
I have an interest in the relationship of the height of this proposed dwelling to the neighbouring new properties, but perhaps that's one for officers later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Norris. Councillor Mellon?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys?
No questions. Well presented. Thank you.
Councillor Caston?
No questions. Thank you very much.
And myself, no, I don't have any questions as such now. Can we come back to Sebastian Blemmings? Have you got that detail of the size of the property proposed, please? Hello, Mr. Blemmings. Have you got details of the size of the property?
My apologies. Sorry, I was on mute. It's 213 metres squared, and that's for a 4-bedroom dwelling, as I believe it was suggested it was a 3-bed, but it's actually a 4.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And so now we open for debate. And so we'll go through a first round first for Councillor Warboys, please.
Yeah. My response to this, I did look at, before I looked at the photographs, I did look at this on Street View, and it is quite striking the difference in heights between the rear of the property and the Cedar Cottage. I think that the layout, you look going down Church Street, it is, isn't it? Where you've got this row of eight very large houses, and this proposed addition to this row of houses is, the footprint is certainly as big as, if not bigger than, some of those houses. I think we do have a responsibility about design and layout of buildings, and especially and there's two things I think here. One is that it is outside the settlement boundary. The second thing is it does affect the context of Cedar Cottage, which, though it's not listed, is considered as a significant historical asset, and Cedar Cottage, from many viewpoints, looks as an isolated cottage in the countryside. And I think this proposed development does impinge on that. It is a very large building. It is over, and the comments about it being overbearing and inappropriate scale, I think, are very strong ones. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Warboys. Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, I think I slightly echo Councillor Warboys here. I think we heard the phrase bookend. Well, with development, we tend not to do that, certainly in rural areas. We tend to sort of try and blend things in. And the scale and massing of this does seem to be inappropriate to an edge of village setting. I think probably what does help us with this are the pictures of the existing houses. Because, you know, if you were going to landscape and try and blend it into a landscape, this size of dwelling from this road especially, you'd need to plant a Wellingtonia or something, you know, to be able to get anywhere near it. I think, you know, for me, the amount of benefit from one very large family home, where you could possibly have designed something a lot lower rise, possibly 2 dwellings there that would have been more modest and certainly in height may have been more appropriate to its setting. I think this one, given what we've already got coming along there, which I would still argue as to whether that was appropriate back then, that, you know, I remember Councillor Melvin used to say, if you think I'm ugly, you should look at my brother. You know, there's an element of, we have an opportunity here, if we are going to go outside of the existing settlement, which in terms of the emerging joint local plan we are, that should be an opportunity, not just replicating things that we may have chosen different if we had our time again.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stringer. Councillor Norris.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm struggling with trying to imagine this very large building in this context. It seems to me that it would be very prominent, and it would be helpful if it were possible to have some sort of idea of how this would relate, as I mentioned earlier, to the existing neighbouring 8 new dwellings. I mean, I have a real concern regarding what would appear to be the perceived bulk and mass of this particular building in this location, and the overbearing effect on Cedar Cottage, bearing in mind the difference in the land levels as well. Additionally, I mean, we're looking at something like a 10.7 metre height altogether to the adjoining land. So I do have real concerns about whether this is appropriate at all in this particular location. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Norris. Councillor Mellon.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I mean, I'm really sharing the same concerns that have been expressed by other members of the committee. There seems to me there's a clash here between the line of new development properties, which are all fairly big. Fine, they've all been approved and are being built out. But this one at the end sort of becomes almost like the biggest one of the lot because of its position. I mean, I think there's scope here for a property, but it wouldn't be this one in my mind. It would be something tucked in towards the back of the site, probably 1 or 1.5 stories, and that would really reduce the sort of prominence of the development in the landscape and the effect on Cedar Cottage. So whilst I see there's potential for development here, it doesn't seem to me that this proposed one is the appropriate size.
Thank you for that. Councillor Humphreys.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm pretty much going to echo what everybody else has said. Can we bring up the photograph, please, that was taken so you can see the cottage on the left-hand side and the development that's going on right now? I think it's brought up earlier.
The one John brought up for us.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. John, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. I just realised you don't mean on the PowerPoint. You mean the neighbour.
Yeah, the one that we the one that we asked that we
Yeah.
had a briefing. Yeah.
Yep, sure. Let me go back. That one. That one. That should be on screen now.
Any second. You are. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So the top photograph. So this is the entrance to the village, pretty much, isn't it? And that's okay.
There you go.
And the developer talked about landscaping to improve the overall view of the development as you approach. Really, unless you're going to camouflage this thing completely, how can you not see it? The house that you can see with the stuff on the roof, I believe, is one of the properties that's under current development. And that's quite a far way back from the cottage if you refer back to the plans. Now imagine this other house, which is going to be 15 metres at its closest point to the cottage on the left. Just imagine it, okay? And you don't need much imagination to actually see that that's inappropriate. It's on an elevated site and it would dominate that cottage. It would dominate the view and it would dominate what you see as you approach that really historic village. So I think that photograph says pretty much everything. The houses on the rest of the development, I actually like, and I know it's in the eye of the beholder, but I actually like the properties. I just don't see that it's appropriate to build another one only 15 metres on an elevated position to that historic cottage. It's just not right. And I think that's what it comes down to. This comes down to it's just not right. It comes down to common sense. And it comes down to just looking at it and go, look, this is clearly, obviously not right. And we must have the moral courage, I think, to oppose it, mainly because of its dominance issues and its location. Anywhere else it's to be a great house, but on this elevated position close to that cottage, it's not. If you go into page 201, which is 5.1, design, layout, impact on street scene, it talks there about how we're not going to impose, we're not going to look through our windows and see into the cottage and all the other stuff. What it doesn't talk about, I don't think, is how you would feel living in that cottage, looking out on this domineering building pretty much in your garden. It doesn't talk about the lack of that sunlight as it comes around during the summer and winter months, especially the winter. So it's all about the house. It's not about the cottage, and I think it's wrong. So we've got to think about the occupants as well. This just isn't right. And it doesn't matter what landscaping you bring in, it still won't be right. And again, I'll refer you to that top photograph and just think about what another house would look like 15 metres from the cottage on the left, and you'll probably come to the same conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Caston.
Yes, I have issues with this from a design and layout point of view. It does seem to have a certain amount of overlooking issues, but I think mainly my issue is the overshadowing due to the orientation, like the trees will almost certainly cause more of an overshadowing problem. We've got an older design of house in Cedar Cottage, and these older houses require more light than a normal house because of the design. They're smaller windows. The more light you get, the better the environment is. And I believe that this development, with the height of it, with the trees for screening, would take such a huge amount of light out of that building that would be completely unacceptable. The other issue is the protection of a historic building, which really goes hand in hand. It is a non-designated historic asset, but I think it needs protecting from this overshadowing and turning it into a lesser environment to live in. So that's where I am on it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Caston. Well, I've made several notes here and they've all been brought up really by everybody. On page 200, it tells us about a sufficient number and range of homes to provide needs of the present and future generations. These are huge. I think villages like this need some smaller properties. Further landscaping, which Councillor Caston has just alluded to, and we can't change what's already there, we accept that. But if you put some further landscaping along, shall we say, the back of the cottage, it's just going to enclose them even further. What about, I did ask the officer for angles on lighten things because they've got solar panels on the back there. I also note that the Heritage have asked about the question of size, and members have brought up the size of this. And I have to say, this is a déjà vu application as far as I'm concerned. And it would be, I have something in Debenham that's going to appeal at the moment, and it would just be like prisoner cell block H to be sort of squashed in, crowded in. I find it very difficult. I have to own up, I did drive past there the other day to get some eggs from the automatic egg machine. And when I came back and looked at that site from the corner, that's what horrified me more, which is why we have those two late pictures up. Sorry, I don't think this is right. Also, the garden, everybody's saying there's no overlooking from the houses, but the little cottage has Velux windows. And if they open them during the day, anybody in the garden could just look straight into their house. And unfortunately, the applicant tells us that, well, if it's not going to be built on, it'll look terrible. That's not a planning reason. So I'm very disappointed with this. I heard what Councillor Mellon said about there might be room for a property, but I'm not so sure about that myself. But then you'd have to look at that if it came again. So I can't support this as it stands, and that's my view on it. So we've all spoken. Does anybody want to make a proposal?
I would, Chair.
Who's that?
Councillor Stringer.
Oh, right. Councillor Stringer, yes. Sorry, we didn't see. Where are you?
I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, there.
I'll push the button. Sorry, Chair. I didn't want to take up your bandwidth.
Oh, you can do what me
bandwidth's
all right this afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's elements here that clearly I think we're feeling enough is enough. But we also have policies to back this up.
Absolutely.
I think there needs to be a recognition of where the built form of this village is. We've now, I won't say laid it in stone yet because it hasn't been through consultations, but we've had creep of development through the years of no longer having a 5-year land supply and needing to be compliant with the NPPF. Totally understand that, but there has to be a balance struck. And when you get to the edge of settlements, I think that's where you need to strike that and be even more sensitive. And you can see from this one, from that shot across the corner, how even what we have already agreed to is, I would say, possibly beyond the limit, which means you really need to be sensitive. So I'm not saying nothing should ever be built on this parcel of land. What I'm saying, if anything comes about here, it's got to clearly demonstrate how it's going to improve the lot at the moment and actually deliver something that this village actually desperately needs. Because as the officer said, oh, this will have to comply with SIL. Yeah, but just because it has to comply with SIL doesn't mean to say it gives up any money to help. There's a number of dwellings like this that do not have to pay a penny because of how they're constructed. So we need to be careful of that as a plus. So having weighed up the pluses of saying yes to another development here and the minuses that this brings about, the minuses for me far outweigh the plus. I think this is not appropriate to its setting. I think it's completely out of character with the village, although it could be argued it's in character with what's already being built along that edge. So, and equally, I think we need to protect the edge of settlement. So I find this totally inappropriate to its setting. I think it's also not a brilliant, although the design concept I quite like. I like the idea of things looking like barns. I'm quite a brutalist in that area myself. I quite like that. It's a good approach, but it has to be appropriate to its setting. And frankly, if the landowner says, I will let this all grow up with weeds and whatever, actually we call that a wildflower meadow, that'd be brilliant right on that corner. So really can't support this in any way, shape or form, and would happily move refusal based on policy GP1 Normally HBO2 is normally another
H16.
H16, yeah, because certainly that residential amenity, as Councillor Guthrie mentioned, if you stood in that garden, let alone bounced up and down on a trampoline, you'd be able to physically look, if not bounce completely into those open velux windows. That's really not appropriate there. So we're not saying never, but what we're saying is that would need to be really respectful of the whole of that area, not just respectful to the ones already built.
Thank you for that, Councillor. And I think, did I not see, this is where I get in a muddle, did I not see Councillor Humphrey came first and then Councillor Caston? Was that right? Yes, Councillor Humphrey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Was that a proposal, was the first question?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes it was.
I'd like to second it, and all your points are absolutely appropriate. Also, if you look at the MPPF, where it talks about 3 dimensions of sustainable development, even though the officer argues it, I would actually argue that it doesn't contribute to protecting or enhancing the built or historic environment, and that's another reason for refusal. So I would second the proposal for refusal.
And then, sorry, Councillor Caston, I think we might have usurped you a bit.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just, I was going to say, if I did second it, that we could add HB1 to the policies that this that makes this unacceptable, if the councillors wish to. The protection of historic buildings.
Can I also ask John Pateman G, because I mean, if people want to put up fences and things, we don't want them to be blocked in, you know, if that comes back as an alternative. Just before we go one little bit further, can I just ask John for that, please?
Yes, so there's a couple of aspects here. I'll come back to HB1 in a moment. Just a bit, we've talked about landscaping a lot, and we've talked about the relationship between the two. There's a couple of governing factors here we need to bear in mind. At the moment, this is an agricultural field. Anyone can plant whatever they want in that context. So you could put a whole load of trees, a whole load of hedges, and you can also put a fence up to 2 meters high along the boundary, wherever that boundary is not disputed to be. Now that might be at the top of the bank, or it might be the bottom, but ultimately there is that in terms of what is a permitted development, and that is a material consideration. So if we
but hang on a minute, John, that would be a vexatious activity to do that.
No, if a reason for refusal is based on the harm of overlooking from a person standing in the new garden, and yet permitted development would allow a 2 meter fence that would block that harm, I would say that we would be in a poor position to defend an appeal on that basis.
Well, I'm sorry. Councillor Stringer, your proposer, you're shaking your head. Say your bit, please.
Now, but I do. I'm listening, and there are other aspects.
John, can you let Councillor Stringer speak? Just a minute, please.
Yeah, just to say, it wasn't about it was the normal use of a garden. People play on things, and I know you can restrict permitted development right and all that nonsense, but you can't stop children putting boxes on things and climbing on things and all that, and that will directly overlook this garden to such an extent because of the topography. If this was a level flat field, this wouldn't be an issue, but the fact from ground level you're already above those windows, I think that is the problem.
Yes, so what you're talking about there is the intrusive impact on amenity as a whole, and which
was H16.
Yes, so but I think just we need to be careful about specifics and general amenity, and I wanted to be careful with how we word that through. Before I get onto the HB1, can I also just talk about the local plan, the emerging local plan? If members are looking to include that in a reason for refusal, that is fine, but in terms of that's a potential thing you could do, but just bear in mind that at this current iteration of the current emerging joint local plan, there is a provision for infill development in linear lines of 10 houses, and I believe this would qualify. So I want to be careful with any pulling in of the emerging local plan, and I have to go away and think about that if that's where members want to go. However, you have been talking about the setting and the enjoyment of Cedar Cottage. Now, it is a non-designated heritage asset. HB1 is a bit of an interesting policy because it's basically, I'll read out what it states. The District Planning Authority places a high priority on protecting the character and appearance of all buildings of architectural or historic interest, full stop. Particular attention will be given to the protection of the setting of listed buildings. This is not a listed building, so that part would not really apply, but the first sentence, that we place a high priority on the protection of the character on historic interest, would apply. So you could apply HB1 in at least in part.
You happy with that, Andrew? Councillor Stringer, you happy with that? And Councillor Humphreys, are you happy with what's been said so far?
I am. I'll keep going back to the MPPF paragraph 8, which talks about those the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, and it's the harm to the historic setting, and it doesn't enhance our built or historic environment. So it fails in a lot of ways, this. So anything you can add to it, fantastic. But yeah.
And also, don't forget the parish councillor did say about the setting of the buildings opposite, which I think also need to be taken into reflection. Yeah, I don't mean you to add anything to it, but I think it's all part of it.
No, agreed. And I don't believe we should worry about the fence. We shouldn't worry about the trees or anything like that. Let's just deal with what we're here for, which is this application for this particular property. And I think we've got enough there to go for refusal.
So can you drum up some words for us, John? We'll give you a few moments, and then I don't think, unless anybody wants to state anything else, I'll allow you to put your hands up if you need to say anything of great importance. No, good, okay.
May I ask one more question, Madam Chair, if I may? Overlooking, is that part of...
It's from the garden into the property, would you agree, Councillor Stringer?
But not from the house itself and the Velux windows of the proposed dwelling?
Well, the issue is any window on that side that can be within 2 metres of a floor has the capability of directly looking down into Cedar Cottage. And I need to ask, what is the amenity area of Cedar Cottage? Where do they sit in the sunshine in a deck chair? You know, because their rear garden is less than 2 metres wide. They sit to the side. So yes. Anyone looking at any window at first floor level at the back of that building is going to directly look at these people at less than 20 metres, you know, and we normally try and avoid direct looking into windows at about 21 metres, don't we, John? And this I think would, you know, it's because of the limited amenity area of Cedar Cottage before we even start. I think so any impingement into their amenity area from overlooking is devastating to that property. It's not that, and that's not common to many properties, but it certainly is to this one.
Right, okay, I think I've got most of what...
Councillor Keston, did you want to speak again? I see your hand, or is that from before?
I just wanted to agree with Councillor Stringer. I think the fact that the roof lights of the proposed development are not only they're lower down on the floor level of the second floor. I think that I would definitely say that there would be some degree of overlooking.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I was to suggest, given what I have heard in respect of a reason to take forward, I may put it something like this. The proposed dwelling, if approved, would represent a overly dominant development out of scale with the character of the prevailing existing dwellings, with particular harmful impact on the rural setting and enjoyment of occupiers of Cedar Cottage, a non-designated heritage asset. And this includes impact on their privacy. Furthermore, the detrimental, intrusive impact and harm on amenity is made worse by the provision and scale of the development on higher land compared to existing development. On this basis, the development is considered contrary to, and I would give you the following policies I feel are relevant: H16, which obviously refers to residential amenity, H13, H15, that talks about appropriate development and design, GP1, which is also design, HB1, which is historic setting of the local plan, And I would go on to add to that FC1 and 1.1 of the focus review that refers to development needing to enhance the area for design purposes, as well as being contrary to chapter 12, and that's the entire design chapter of the NPPF, with particular reference to paragraphs 127 and 130 that talk about refusal of bad design and layout. The limited public benefit of one dwelling is not considered to outweigh the harm identified. Would that be sufficient, members?
Sounds good enough to me. Proposer, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that comprehensively sums up all of my reasons.
Seconder, Barry, Councillor Humphreys?
Yes, thank you. Very clear.
Right, in that case then, can we go to the Governance Officer to do a roll call on the matter in hand? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if you could please respond with for, against or abstain. So, Councillor James Carston?
Against.
No, for.
Oh, sorry.
Can we make it clear what we're voting for?
For, Robert.
So we'll start again, Chair, if that's right, just for clarity's sake.
Can we just get clarity with Ian Dupre that this seems to have been a bit of a mistake, and we need clarity.
Well, is it so? What we've had the proposal.
Which is to refuse.
It's to refuse. Yes, I thought so. So in that case, members who wish to refuse should obviously vote for this resolution.
I think Councillor Caston might have got confused.
Yeah, I apologise, Madam Chairman. I did get confused. I'd like to be for the proposal to refuse the application, please.
So Ian Dupre, can we take that vote again because of the?
Yes, I think so. Agree. I'm looking at Mr. Carmichael as well. I think a member corrects themselves, and we
yeah,
haven't.
That's absolutely fine, Chair. We could just, as Councillor Carston just confirms again the way he intends to vote, and I will record that.
Yeah, for the proposal on the table to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor.
It does sound a bit back to front, doesn't it?
Councillor Guthrie?
For the proposal on the table to refuse.
Councillor Humphreys?
For.
Councillor Mellon?
For.
Councillor Norris?
For.
Councillor Stringer?
For.
And Councillor Warboys?
For the proposal.
Thank you, councillors. That's unanimous, Chair. I'll just confirm with Mr. Dupre.
Yes, indeed, unanimous vote for the proposal to refuse.
Thank you. That's very clear. So I now move on to see if there are any site inspections.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. In that case, then I now formally close the meeting, but thank everyone for their patience and attendance and input today. Thank you very much indeed. Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Chair.
you.